Tonight, a man considered invisible will become the only one who can save an empire from collapse. A billion-dollar deal is in disarray, a contract no one can decipher, and one wrong decision will destroy everything. Stay with me until the end of this story, like and comment on the city you're viewing so I know how far my story has progressed. The fluorescent lights in the 43rd floor hallway buzzed with the kind of low, persistent hum that could drive a person insane if they listened too long. Ethan Cole had learned not to listen. He'd learned not to notice a lot of things during his 3 years working the graveyard shift at Hale Industries. The way executives looked through him like he was made of glass. The whispered conversations that stopped when his cleaning cart squeaked past. The expensive watches that cost more than his annual salary. He'd become a ghost in a building full of people who thought they mattered. Tonight felt different, though. He couldn't put his finger on why. Ethan pushed his cart down the executive wing, the wheels protesting with each rotation. It was nearly 11, later than usual for this floor. Normally, the suits cleared out by 9, rushing home to their families or mistresses or whatever filled the void between one workday and the next. But tonight, light still spilled from beneath the door of the main conference room, and voices carried into the hallway, sharp, frustrated, barely controlled. He slowed his cart. Not his business. Never his business. But curiosity was a hard thing to kill, especially when you spent most of your nights alone with your thoughts in a mop bucket. Ethan glanced at the door. The voices grew louder. Someone was angry. No, several someones were angry. "This is a disaster," a man's voice snapped. "An absolute disaster." "We're aware of that, Richard." A woman this time, younger, with an edge like a blade wrapped in silk. Stating the obvious doesn't solve the problem. Ethan recognized that voice. Vanessa Hale, the CEO. 29 years old and running a Fortune 500 company she'd inherited from her father 2 years ago. The business magazines loved her. Beautiful, ruthless, brilliant. The employees feared her. Ethan had seen her exactly twice in 3 years, both times from a distance. She moved through the building like a force of nature, and people scrambled to get out of her way. He should keep moving. His shift didn't end until 6 in the morning, and he still had 12 floors to cover. But something made him stop. Maybe it was the desperation in that conference room. Maybe it was the bone-deep exhaustion that came from working 60-hour weeks while caring for a sick kid alone. Maybe he was just tired of being invisible. Ethan parked his cart against the wall and moved closer to the door. "We need someone who can read German," another voice said. Older, strained. "Legal German. Technical German. This contract is 300 pages of dense terminology, and the translator we hired quit 4 hours ago." "Quit?" Vanessa's voice could have frozen nitrogen. "Or did you fire him for incompetence?" A pause. "He said the contract was too complex for the timeline we gave him." Of course he did. The sound of paper slamming against a table echoed through the door. "We're supposed to sign this deal in 8 hours." 8 hours? And now you're telling me we can't even read the terms? "The German firm won't budge on the language requirement," the older voice continued. "Their legal team insists on German documentation for the primary contract. It's non-negotiable." "Everything's negotiable, Marcus." "Not this. Not with Klaus Reinhardt. You know his reputation." Ethan's hand was on the door handle before he realized what he was doing. This was insane. He was a janitor, a single father working nights to pay for his son's medication, living in a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where the sirens never stopped. He had no business inserting himself into corporate disasters, but he also had a gift he'd never told anyone about, a gift that had seemed useless for most of his adult life. He spoke German, fluently. And not just conversational German, he'd studied legal translation in college, back when he'd had dreams bigger than a mop and a bucket. Back before his wife died and left him with a 6-month-old son and medical debt that would take a lifetime to clear. Ethan turned the handle and pushed the door open. 12 faces turned toward him with expressions ranging from confusion to outrage. The conference room was massive, all glass walls and polished mahogany, with a view of the city skyline that probably cost more per square foot than Ethan made in a month. The table was buried under documents, laptops, half-empty coffee cups, and the unmistakable stench of corporate panic. At the head of the table sat Vanessa Hale. She was smaller than he'd expected. On the covers of Forbes and Bloomberg, she looked larger than life. Immaculate suits, perfect makeup, eyes that could dissect a balance sheet at 50 paces. In person, at nearly midnight with her jacket discarded and her sleeves rolled up, she looked human, tired, frustrated. Still beautiful in that unattainable way, but human. Her eyes locked onto Ethan with the intensity of a sniper acquiring a target. "Who the hell are you?" she said. Ethan's mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed at him to back out of the room, apologize, disappear back into his comfortable invisibility. But he thought of his son. He thought of the medical bills. He thought of the years he'd spent being nothing. "Ethan Cole," he said. "I work here. Night shift." One of the men at the table, silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of tan that came from golf courses and Caribbean vacations, let out a sharp laugh. "The janitor? Are you kidding me? How did you even get in here?" another executive demanded. A woman this time, mid-40s, with the pinched expression of someone who'd built a career on saying no. "This is a private meeting." Ethan didn't move. The door was unlocked. "That doesn't mean enough." Vanessa held up one hand and the room fell silent. She studied Ethan with those sharp eyes, and he felt like a bug under a microscope. "You interrupted a very important meeting, Mr. Cole. This better be good." "I heard you need someone who can read German," Ethan said. "Legal German." The silence that followed was profound. Then the silver-haired man laughed again, louder this time. "Oh, this is rich. This is absolutely rich. The janitor speaks German." "Richard," Vanessa said quietly. "Shut up." Richard's smile faltered. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "You speak German?" "Yes, legal German. I studied legal translation in college," Ethan said. "I'm fluent." "The janitor," Richard said again, shaking his head. "The goddamn janitor speaks legal German. What's next? The security guard has a PhD in quantum physics?" A few nervous laughs rippled around the table. Ethan felt heat crawl up his neck. This was a mistake. Of course it was a mistake. These people didn't see him as a person with skills or a past or anything beyond the mop in his hands. But Vanessa wasn't laughing. "Can you prove it?" she asked. Ethan met her gaze. "Give me the contract." The room erupted. "You can't be serious. This is absurd." "We don't have time for games." "I said quiet." Vanessa's voice cut through the chaos like a guillotine. She stood, grabbed a thick document from the table, and walked around to where Ethan stood. Up close, she was even more striking, dark hair pulled back, sharp features, eyes that missed nothing. She smelled like expensive perfume and black coffee. She held out the document. "Page 47, the section on liability transfers." Ethan took the contract. His hands were rough from years of cleaning chemicals and hard work, a stark contrast to the pristine pages. He flipped to page 47 and scanned the dense German text. "Haftungsübertragung," he read aloud. His German was rusty, but it came back like muscle memory. This section establishes that in the event of contractual breach by the secondary party, all liability for financial damages, legal fees, and third-party claims shall be transferred in full to the primary party, with no limitation on total exposure or timeline for claim submission. He looked up. Every person in the room was staring at him. "That means," Ethan continued, "if the other company screws up, your company takes the blame and pays for everything, forever." Vanessa's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Keep going." The next clause establishes automatic renewal terms. If either party fails to provide written termination notice at least 18 months prior to the end of the contract period, the agreement automatically renews for another 10 years under the same terms. And get this, the termination notice has to be delivered in person, in German, to a specific office in Hamburg during business hours on a Tuesday. "A Tuesday?" one of the executives said. "That's oddly specific." "It's a trap," Ethan said. "The whole thing is designed to lock you in and make it nearly impossible to get out." The room had gone completely silent. Vanessa took the contract from his hands and flipped through it, her eyes racing over the text. "Marcus, did our lawyers review these specific clauses?" The older man from earlier, Marcus, cleared his throat. "They reviewed the English summary documents provided by the German firm." The English summaries, Vanessa's voice was dangerously calm, not the actual contract. The timeline was very tight, and the translator assured us, "The translator who quit." Marcus said nothing. Vanessa turned back to Ethan. What else? I'd need more time to read the whole thing, Ethan said. But from what I've seen in the first 50 pages, this contract is a disaster waiting to happen. The liability clauses alone would expose your company to unlimited financial risk. He's bluffing, Richard said. He has to be. No one just happens to speak fluent legal German and works as a janitor. Why not? Ethan said, and the bitterness in his voice surprised even him. You think everyone starts where they end up? You think life doesn't happen? People don't fall, don't lose things? Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. Vanessa was still watching Ethan with that unreadable expression. Why are you working nights as a janitor if you have a college degree in legal translation? The question was direct, not cruel, but it still hit like a punch to the gut. My wife died, Ethan said simply. 7 years ago. Cancer. Left me with a baby and medical debt that would choke a horse. I needed steady work, benefits, something I could do while my son slept. This job provided that. The legal field didn't. The room was so quiet, Ethan could hear the air conditioning hum. Your son, Vanessa said. How old? 7. He has asthma. Severe. The medication alone costs more than most people's rent. Vanessa nodded slowly. Then she turned to the table. Everyone out, except Marcus and Ethan. Vanessa, we need to discuss. Out. Now. The executives filed out like scolded children, Richard shooting Ethan a look of pure venom as he passed. When the door closed, only 3 people remained in the massive conference room. Vanessa gestured to a chair. Sit. Ethan sat. His heart was hammering so hard he thought it might crack a rib. Marcus, Vanessa said, give him the full contract, all 300 pages. Marcus hesitated. Vanessa, we can't just... We're 8 hours from signing a deal we apparently don't understand. Our translator quit. Our lawyers reviewed summary documents instead of the actual contract. We're flying blind. She looked at Ethan. Unless we're not. You're really going to trust the janitor? Marcus said. I'm going to trust someone who actually speaks the language, Vanessa shot back, and who apparently has nothing to gain by lying to us. She turned to Ethan. Do you have anything to gain by lying to us? No, Ethan said. But I don't have anything to gain by helping you either. You want something to gain? Everyone wants something, Ms. Hale. A smile ghosted across her lips. Vanessa, if you're going to save my company, call me Vanessa. She leaned forward. Here's the deal. You read this contract, all of it. You tell me every trap, every hidden clause, every word that might come back to bite us. You do that, and I'll pay you. A lot. How much? How much do you make in a year? Ethan swallowed. 32,000, before taxes. Something flickered across Vanessa's face. It might have been pity, but it vanished too quickly to tell. I'll pay you 50,000 for tonight, plus a bonus if you find something that saves us from this deal. $50,000. Ethan's mind reeled. That was more than a year's salary. That was his son's medication for the next 2 years. That was a way out of the hole he'd been digging himself deeper into for 7 years. And if I don't find anything, he asked, then we're exactly where we are now. Screwed, but at least we'll know it. Vanessa pushed the contract across the table. What do you say, Ethan? Want to stop being invisible for a night? The weight of that question settled over him. This was crazy. He was a janitor. He hadn't used his German in years. His translation degree had been collecting dust for so long he'd almost forgotten he had it. But he thought of his son, sleeping in their cramped apartment, an inhaler on the nightstand, and dreams that Ethan wanted desperately to make possible. He pulled the contract toward him. I'll need coffee, he said. A lot of coffee. Vanessa smiled. It was a real smile this time, not the corporate mask. Marcus, get this man whatever he needs. The next 4 hours were a blur of German legalese and caffeine. Marcus ordered food that Ethan was too focused to eat. Vanessa made phone calls, paced, worked on her laptop, but always kept one eye on Ethan as he worked his way through the contract page by page. The document was a masterpiece of corporate manipulation. Every section contained hidden traps, carefully worded clauses that seemed reasonable until you understood the implications. The German firm, Reinhardt Holdings, had crafted a contract that would essentially transfer all risk to Hale Industries while maintaining total control over the partnership's assets. At 2 in the morning, Ethan found the first major trap. At 3, he found the second. By 4, he'd identified 17 separate clauses that would be devastating if triggered. This section, he said, pointing to page 143. Vanessa leaned over his shoulder, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating off her. It establishes that any intellectual property developed during the partnership automatically becomes joint property, with Reinhardt Holdings maintaining primary ownership rights. That's not in the summary, Marcus said, flipping through his own documents. No, it's buried under a section titled Administrative Procedures. But the wording is clear. Any patents, technologies, processes your company develops while this contract is active, even if they have nothing to do with the partnership, become partially owned by Reinhardt. Vanessa straightened. That's insane. That's predatory, Ethan corrected. And legal, if you sign this. What else? Ethan had compiled a list. He walked them through it, watching Vanessa's expression grow darker with each revelation. The termination clauses that made it nearly impossible to exit the contract. The arbitration requirements that forced all disputes to be handled in German courts under German law. The liability transfers that would make Hale Industries responsible for Reinhardt's debts under certain conditions. By the time he finished, Vanessa was pacing the room like a caged animal. They were trying to rob us, she said, in broad daylight, with a pen and a smile. Klaus Reinhardt has a reputation for this, Marcus said quietly. I tried to warn your father before. My father is dead. Vanessa's voice was flat, and I'm not him. She stopped pacing and looked at Ethan. You're sure about all this? I'm sure. No mistakes in the translation? No misunderstandings? The German is very clear, deliberately clear, in some sections. They wanted you to sign this without reading it carefully. Vanessa laughed, but there was no humor in it. And we almost did. We almost walked into this with our eyes closed. She pulled out her phone and checked the time. The signing is in 4 hours. We need to call it off. Vanessa, we can't just... Marcus started. We can. We will. I'm not signing a contract that turns this company into Reinhardt's personal ATM. She looked at Ethan. Can you write up a summary? Everything you found, in plain English, with specific page references. Something I can send to our lawyers and board members. Yes. How long will it take? Ethan looked at the stack of pages, his notes, the scope of what he'd uncovered. 2 hours, maybe 3. You have 90 minutes. After that, I need to start making phone calls. She walked to the door, then paused. Ethan? Yeah? Thank you. Seriously, you just saved this company from something that would have destroyed it. Ethan felt something warm unfold in his chest. Pride, maybe. Or just the simple human need to be seen. I'm not done yet, he said. No, Vanessa agreed. But you will be. She left the room, Marcus trailing behind her. Ethan was alone with 300 pages of German legal text, and a deadline that would have terrified him if he wasn't already running on adrenaline and black coffee. He cracked his knuckles and got to work. But at 6:30 in the morning, as the sun started to paint the sky outside the conference room windows, Ethan finished the summary. 15 pages of clear, concise English explaining every trap in the Reinhardt contract, page references, legal implications, estimated financial exposure. He'd even included suggestions for how to renegotiate if Vanessa decided the partnership was still worth pursuing, which he doubted. He printed the document and carried it down the hall to Vanessa's office. She was on the phone when he knocked, but waved him in. The office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that probably cost more than Ethan's car. Vanessa looked like she hadn't slept, hair slightly mussed, makeup faded, exhaustion etched into the fine lines around her eyes. But when she saw the document in Ethan's hands, she sat up straighter. I'll call you back, she said into the phone, and hung up without waiting for a response. Is that it? Everything I found, with explanations and page references. Vanessa took the summary and started reading. Ethan stood there, suddenly aware that he was still wearing his janitor's uniform, that he smelled like floor cleaner and sweat, that he didn't belong in this office any more than he belonged in the boardroom. But Vanessa was reading like her life depended on it, and maybe it did. This is excellent, she said, flipping pages. Clear, thorough, documented, better than half the reports my own analysts produce. She looked up. You wrote this in 90 minutes? 87, actually. a real smile. Show off. She set the summary down and leaned back in her chair. I'm canceling the signing, sending this to the board and our lawyers. Klaus Reinhardt is going to be furious, but I don't care. You were right. This deal would have destroyed us. What about the partnership? Was it important? It was supposed to give us access to European markets, manufacturing contracts, distribution networks, all very lucrative. Vanessa shrugged. But not at the cost of giving away the company. We'll find another way. Ethan nodded. The adrenaline was wearing off and exhaustion hit him like a truck. He swayed slightly. When did you last sleep? Vanessa asked. Yesterday, before my shift. Ethan checked his watch. His shift had ended 30 minutes ago. He needed to get home before his son woke up, needed to be there to help with breakfast and morning medication. I should go. Wait. Vanessa opened a drawer and pulled out a checkbook. I promised you $50,000. You don't have to. I do. You earned it. She wrote the check with quick, efficient strokes. Plus a bonus. You didn't just find problems, Ethan. You saved this company from a catastrophic mistake. She ripped the check free and held it out. Ethan took it. The number made his vision blur. $100,000. This is too much, he said. It's not enough, Vanessa countered, but it's what I can do right now. She stood and extended her hand. Thank you, really. Ethan shook her hand. Her grip was firm, warm, real. You're welcome, he said. He turned to leave, but Vanessa's voice stopped him. Ethan, one more thing. He turned back. How long have you been working here? 3 years? Yeah. And in those 3 years, how many people do you think noticed you? Really saw you? Ethan thought about it. None. That's what I thought. Vanessa folded her arms. We have a problem in this company, a culture problem. People like Richard see employees as either useful or invisible. There's no middle ground. She paused. I want to change that, and I want your help. My help? I need someone who understands what it's like to be invisible. Someone who sees the whole picture, not just the corner office view. Someone who has skills we're too arrogant to recognize. She smiled. Someone like you. Ethan's heart was pounding again. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to offer you a job. Not as a janitor, as a consultant. Contract review, translation services. Maybe some HR work helping us identify talent we've been overlooking. The pay would be substantial. The hours flexible. You'd have benefits, real benefits. The kind that would cover your son's medication without you having to choose between prescriptions and rent. The room felt like it was spinning. I don't understand, Ethan said. You don't even know me. I know you showed up when no one asked you to. I know you took a risk to help people who've probably never given you a second thought. I know you're smart, capable, and honest. Vanessa's expression softened. And I know you deserve better than night shifts and poverty wages. So what do you say? What could he say? This was everything he'd given up hoping for. Everything he'd thought he'd lost when his wife died and the world fell apart. I need to think about it, Ethan said, and even to his own ears it sounded insane. Who turned down an offer like this? But Vanessa just nodded. Fair enough. Take the day. Call me tomorrow. She handed him a business card with her direct number. And Ethan, whatever you decide, you change something here tonight. Don't forget that. Ethan took the card and the check that would transform his life. He walked out of the office, down the hallway past executives who were starting to arrive for the day, past the conference room where he'd inserted himself into a world that wasn't his. The sun was fully up now, and the city sprawled below in all its chaotic beauty. Ethan had started this shift as a janitor, invisible and forgotten. He was ending it as something else entirely. And for the first time in 7 years, he had no idea what came next. The apartment door stuck like it always did, swollen from years of humidity and neglect. Ethan had to put his shoulder into it, the same practice shove he'd done 1,000 times before. The hinges groaned in protest as he stumbled inside, exhausted down to his bones. 7:15 in the morning. He'd made it home with 45 minutes to spare before Jamie woke up. The apartment was quiet except for the familiar drip of the kitchen faucet he kept meaning to fix and never did. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room barely big enough for a couch, and a TV that only got basic channels. The carpet was worn through in places, showing the concrete underneath. The walls were thin enough that he could hear Mrs. Chen next door arguing with her daughter about something in rapid Cantonese. Home, such as it was. Ethan locked the door behind him and leaned against it, letting the weight of the night settle over him. The check was still in his pocket, folded carefully, impossibly real. $100,000. He'd checked it 3 times on the subway ride home, certain it would vanish or reveal itself as some cruel joke. But it was real. Vanessa Hale's signature, bold and certain across the bottom. He pulled it out and stared at it again in the weak morning light filtering through the blinds. This piece of paper changed everything. Jamie's medication for the next 3 years, paid in full. The overdue electric bill. The credit cards he'd been juggling like a circus act. Maybe even a new apartment, something with 2 bedrooms so Jamie didn't have to sleep on the couch anymore. The thought made Ethan's throat tight. He walked to Jamie's makeshift bedroom, really just the couch with a curtain rigged up for privacy, and pulled the curtain back slightly. His son was still asleep, curled up under the Star Wars comforter Ethan had found at a thrift store. Jamie's inhaler sat on the overturned milk crate that served as a nightstand, next to a glass of water and the spaceship model they'd been building together. 7 years old, small for his age, with Ethan's dark hair and his mother's delicate features. Sarah's features. The asthma made him fragile in ways that terrified Ethan every single day. But Jamie was tough too, tougher than any kid should have to be. Ethan let the curtain fall closed and headed to the bathroom. He needed a shower and maybe 3 hours of sleep before Jamie woke up. Then it would be breakfast, medication, getting Jamie to school, and trying to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do with Vanessa's offer. The shower was lukewarm at best. The building's water heater had been dying for months, but Ethan stood under it until his muscles started to unknot. The night replayed in his head like a film reel. Walking into that conference room, Vanessa's sharp eyes assessing him. The contract spread out before him like a map to buried treasure. The moment when everyone in that room realized the janitor wasn't quite as invisible as they'd thought. He dried off and pulled on sweatpants and an old college t-shirt that had more holes than fabric. The face in the mirror looked older than 32. Lines around his eyes from squinting at fine print and worrying about bills. Gray starting to thread through his hair at the temples. He looked like a man who'd been running uphill for 7 years and couldn't quite remember what level ground felt like. But today something was different in his reflection. He couldn't name it exactly. Hope, maybe? Or just the unfamiliar feeling of being seen. Ethan climbed into his bed, really just a mattress on the floor in the corner of the living room, separated from Jamie's area by a bookshelf, and closed his eyes. Sleep came fast and heavy, pulling him under like a tide. He dreamed of Sarah, not the sick version from the end, skeletal and gray, fighting a battle she couldn't win, but Sarah from before. Laughing in their old apartment, the good one they'd had before the medical bills buried them. Dancing in the kitchen while dinner burned, holding Jamie for the first time, tears streaming down her face. "You're going to be okay," dreamed Sarah said. "Both of you." Ethan woke to someone shaking his shoulder. "Dad! Dad! Wake up!" He opened his eyes to find Jamie standing over him, already dressed in his school clothes. The kid had gotten himself ready, which meant his shirt was on backwards and his shoes were on the wrong feet, but Ethan's heart swelled anyway. "Hey, buddy," Ethan said, his voice rough with sleep. "What time is it?" "Almost 8. You were sleeping really hard. I tried to be quiet, but I got hungry." Ethan sat up, rubbing his face. 2.5 hours of sleep. Not enough, but it would have to do. "That's okay. Let me make you breakfast." "Can we have the good cereal?" The good cereal meant the name brand stuff, not the generic bag that tasted like cardboard. They usually saved it for special occasions. Jamie's birthday, good report cards, days when Ethan could afford the extra $2. "Yeah," Ethan said, thinking of the check. "Yeah, we can have the good cereal." Jamie's face lit up like Christmas morning. In the kitchen, Ethan poured cereal while Jamie sat at their small table, swinging his legs. The table wobbled. One leg was shorter than the others, but they'd gotten used to it, just like they'd gotten used to a lot of things. "How was work?" Jamie asked through a mouthful of cereal. "Different," Ethan said. He sat down across from his son. "Really different." "Different good or different bad?" "Good, I think. Maybe really good." Jamie studied him with those 2 old eyes. Kids who grew up around sickness and struggle learn to read faces early. You look weird. Weird how? I don't know. Less tired, maybe. Did something happen? Ethan wanted to tell him everything, wanted to explain that everything might be about to change, that the man Jamie knew as a janitor had spent the night saving a billion-dollar company, that they might finally stop drowning. But Jamie was 7. He needed stability, not wild promises. Maybe, Ethan said carefully, I might have a chance at a different job. Better pay, better hours. But nothing's certain yet, okay? Would you still have to work nights? No, I'd be home with you. Jamie's spoon clattered into his bowl. Really? Every night? The hope in his son's voice was almost too much to bear. Really? If it works out? That would be so cool. We could have dinner together, like normal families. Normal families. The phrase hit Ethan like a punch. They'd been surviving so long he'd almost forgotten what normal looked like. Yeah, he said. Like normal families. After breakfast, they went through the morning routine. Jamie's medication first, the inhaler, then the preventive pill crushed into applesauce because he still couldn't swallow pills whole. Ethan watched his son go through the motions with practiced efficiency and hated that a 7-year-old had to be so familiar with medical protocols. All done, Jamie announced. Can I bring my spaceship to school for show and tell? The one we're building? It's not finished yet. I know, but everyone's going to think it's so cool. Please. Ethan considered. The model was delicate, half-assembled, definitely not designed for the chaos of a second-grade classroom. But Jamie rarely asked for things, rarely demanded anything beyond the basics. Okay, he said, but you have to be really careful with it. I will, I promise. They packed Jamie's backpack with more care than usual, wrapping the spaceship model in an old t-shirt for protection. Ethan fixed his son's shirt and shoes, then they headed out into the morning. The walk to Jamie's school took 15 minutes through streets that had seen better days. Graffiti tagged the walls. Broken glass sparkled in the gutters. But Jamie chattered the whole way about his spaceship, about his friend Marcus, who had a turtle, about the book his teacher was reading to the class. Normal kid stuff. Beautiful, ordinary kid stuff. At the school gates, Jamie hugged Ethan tight. Love you, Dad. Love you too, buddy. Have a good day. You too. I hope you get the job. Ethan watched his son disappear into the building, backpack bouncing, precious spaceship clutched carefully in both hands. Then he pulled out his phone and stared at Vanessa Hale's business card. He told her he'd call tomorrow, but tomorrow was technically today, wasn't it? Last night had bled into this morning. The timeline was fuzzy. Ethan dialed before he could talk himself out of it. 2 rings, then Vanessa Hale. Her voice was crisp, professional, wide awake despite the fact that she'd been up all night. Ethan wondered if people like her ever slept. It's Ethan Cole, he said. Ethan, I was hoping you'd call. Background noise suggested she was in a car. Have you thought about my offer? Yes? And? I want to accept, but I have questions first. Fair enough. I'm on my way to the office, but I can talk. Ask away. Ethan started walking, no particular destination in mind. The hours. You said flexible. How flexible? You tell me what you need. You have a son who needs you home. We work around that. And the work itself? You mentioned contract review, translation, HR, but what does that actually look like day to day? Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. Vanessa's voice was refreshingly direct. Here's what I know. We have contracts in 7 languages sitting in filing cabinets that no one's properly reviewed in years. We have employees in roles that don't match their skills because HR just shuffles resumes without actually reading them. We have a culture problem where people like you stay invisible for years. She paused. I want to fix all of that, and I think you can help. Why me? Because you see things others don't. Because you're not afraid to walk into a room where you don't belong and prove everyone wrong. Because you're honest. Another pause. And because you deserve a shot at something better than mopping floors for poverty wages. Ethan found himself on a bench in a small park he'd passed 1,000 times but never actually entered. Early morning joggers circled the path. A woman fed pigeons near the fountain. What happened with the Reinhardt contract, he asked. I sent your summary to the board at 7 this morning. Emergency meeting at 8. We officially canceled the signing 20 minutes ago. Vanessa sounded satisfied. Klaus Reinhardt is threatening legal action, but his lawyers know he doesn't have a leg to stand on. We never signed anything. He's just angry he got caught. Will it hurt your company, losing the deal? Short term, maybe. We'll take a hit in the European markets. But long term? You saved us from something that would have destroyed us within 5 years. The board knows it. Even Richard knows it, though he'll never admit it out loud. Richard, the silver-haired executive who'd laughed at Ethan like he was a trained monkey performing tricks. People like Richard aren't going to make this easy, Ethan said. If I take this job, I'll be the janitor playing dress-up. They'll never see me as an equal. Probably not, Vanessa agreed. But here's the thing, Ethan. I don't need them to see you as an equal. I need you to do work they can't do. And if they have a problem with that, they can take it up with me. You can't fight every battle for me. No. But I can make sure you have the tools and authority to fight your own battles. I can make sure your position is protected, your work is valued, and your paycheck reflects your worth. Her voice softened slightly. Look, I'm not going to pretend this will be easy. Corporate culture is toxic in ways that are hard to fix. But you already proved you can handle pressure. You walked into that conference room last night knowing everyone would look down on you, and you did it anyway. Ethan thought about in that moment. The fear, the anger, the desperate need to be something more than invisible. When would I start? He asked. How about today? Today? Come to the office this afternoon. We'll do the paperwork, set up your workspace, talk through your schedule. Nothing intense, just getting the basics in place. Think of it as a trial run. If it doesn't feel right, you can still walk away. Could he? Could he really walk away from this opportunity? I need to deposit a check first, Ethan said, and pick my son up from school at 3. Perfect. Come by around noon. We'll be done by 2:30. Easy. And Ethan, bring your son with you when you pick him up if you want. I'd like to meet him. The offer caught Ethan off guard. Why? Because he's the reason you do all of this. Because he matters. Vanessa's tone left no room for argument. See you at noon. She hung up. Ethan sat on the bench, phone still pressed to his ear, and tried to process what had just happened. In less than 12 hours, his entire life had tilted off its axis. Yesterday, he was a janitor, invisible to everyone around him. Today, he was being offered a position that could change everything. He stood and headed for the bank. The branch was small and perpetually understaffed. Ethan waited in line behind an elderly man arguing about fees and a woman trying to cash a check that kept getting rejected. When it was finally his turn, he approached the teller, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain. I need to deposit this, Ethan said, sliding the check across the counter. The teller picked it up, glanced at it, then did a double take. Is this real? Yes. She studied him with new eyes, probably trying to reconcile the amount with his thrift store jacket and worn-out shoes. I'll need to verify it. This might take a few minutes. That's fine. She disappeared into the back. Ethan waited, acutely aware of the other customers in line behind him, probably annoyed at the delay. He felt like an imposter, like someone was going to burst through the door and announce this was all a mistake, a clerical error, a joke. But the teller came back with a smile. All verified. How would you like to deposit this? All of it into checking. She processed the transaction with practiced efficiency. When she handed him the receipt, the number at the bottom made his vision swim. $100,000. In his account. Real. Have a great day, the teller said, and actually meant it. Ethan walked out of the bank in a daze. The world looked different somehow, sharper, more possible. He stopped at a pharmacy next, the good one 4 blocks out of his way, that actually stocked Jamie's medication without making him wait 3 days for special orders. The pharmacist recognized him. Ethan, you're early this month. Jamie okay? He's fine. I want to fill his prescriptions. All of them, for the next 3 months. The pharmacist blinked. All of them? That's going to be expensive. I know, I can pay. You sure? Because we can work out a payment plan if... I'm sure. 20 minutes later, Ethan walked out with 3 months of medication in a bag. No juggling, no choosing between the inhaler and the preventive pills. No lying awake at night wondering how he'd afford the next refill. Just medicine. Available. Paid for. The relief was so intense it made him lightheaded. He grabbed coffee from a diner that served breakfast all day, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and waitresses who called everyone honey. Ethan sat by the window and watched the city move around him while he tried to organize his thoughts. Everything was happening too fast. Yesterday, he'd been drowning in poverty and exhaustion. Today, he was being offered a lifeline that seemed too good to be true. But Vanessa had been sincere. He'd seen it in her eyes last night, heard it in her voice this morning. She wasn't playing games. She'd recognized something in him that he'd almost forgotten existed. Potential. At 11:30, Ethan caught the subway to downtown. The Hale Industries building looked different in daylight, all glass and steel, reaching toward the sky like it owned the whole damn city. He'd cleaned this building for 3 years but never entered through the front door. That was for employees who mattered. People like him used the service entrance. Today he walked through the front door. The lobby was massive, marble and chrome, and a security desk that looked like mission control. The guard on duty glanced up as Ethan approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Vanessa Hale. Ethan Cole." The guard checked his computer. "You're on the list. Take the elevator to 43. Someone will meet you." The elevator was the same one Ethan had mopped 1,000 times, but riding it as a visitor instead of an employee felt surreal. The numbers climbed. His reflection in the polished doors showed a man who looked out of place in his clean but shabby clothes. The doors opened on the 43rd floor, and Marcus was waiting. "Ethan," he said, extending his hand. "Good to see you again." "You too." Marcus looked better than he had last night, showered, rested, back in professional mode. "Vanessa's finishing up a call, but she'll be free in a few minutes. Follow me." They walked down the corridor Ethan knew so well from the other side. The executive wing, offices with doors, windows with views, furniture that cost more than cars. Marcus led him to a conference room, not the big one from last night, but a smaller space with a table and comfortable chairs. "Coffee?" Marcus offered. "Sure." While Marcus poured from an expensive-looking machine, Ethan stood by the window and looked out over the city. From this height, you couldn't see the grime and struggle. Everything looked clean, organized, possible. "She's serious about this, you know," Marcus said, handing Ethan a cup. "Vanessa doesn't make offers lightly." "I'm starting to realize that. The board gave her hell this morning. Canceling the Reinhardt deal cost us leverage in 3 ongoing negotiations. But she stood her ground, showed them your summary, made it clear that signing that contract would have been suicide." "How'd they take it?" "Some of them see you as a hero. Others see you as a janitor who got lucky." Marcus's expression was unreadable. "For what it's worth, I think you're the real deal. What you did last night wasn't luck. That was skill and guts." Before Ethan could respond, the door opened. Vanessa walked in looking like she'd slept 8 hours and conquered a small nation before breakfast. Her suit was immaculate, her hair perfect, her energy focused and intense. But up close, Ethan could see the fine lines of exhaustion around her eyes. "Ethan," she said, "glad you made it." "Thanks for having me." She set a folder on the table. "I'm not going to waste your time with corporate nonsense. Here's the offer. Contract position, 60 hours a week at $85 an hour. That's approximately $265,000 annually. Health insurance, full coverage for you and your son. Flexible schedule. You set your hours around Jamie's needs. 6 weeks paid vacation." Ethan's brain stalled somewhere around $265,000 annually. "That's insane," he said. "That's market rate for someone with your skills. Actually, it's below market, but it's what I can justify to the board for a new position." "Vanessa, I was making $32,000 a year yesterday, and you are being massively underpaid for your actual capabilities." She pushed the folder toward him. "Look, I get it. This feels unreal. But you saved this company at least $50 million last night, probably more. This salary is an investment, not charity." Ethan opened the folder. The contract was dense with corporate language, but clear enough. Everything Vanessa had promised, spelled out in black and white. "What if I screw up?" he asked. "What if I can't do the work?" "Then we'll figure it out." "But Ethan, you walked into a disaster last night and solved it in 4 hours. With no preparation, no support, just your skills and your guts." Vanessa leaned forward. "I trust you to handle this. The question is, do you trust yourself?" Did he? Ethan had spent 7 years in survival mode, head down, expectations low. Trusting himself felt like a foreign concept. But he thought of Jamie, of the medication sitting in his apartment, of the chance to be home for dinner, to help with homework, to be a father instead of a ghost who passed through at odd hours. "I trust myself," he said. "Good. Sign the contract." Ethan signed. Vanessa countered with her own signature, then stood and extended her hand. "Welcome to Hale Industries, Ethan, for real this time." They shook. Her grip was firm, grounding. "Marcus will show you to your office," Vanessa continued. "We've set you up in the East Wing. Good light, space for all those contracts you'll be reviewing. IT is getting your computer and credentials ready. HR needs about 45 minutes for paperwork." She checked her watch. "That should put you out of here by 2:30, like I promised." "I have an office?" "You work here now. Of course you have an office." The word office kept repeating in Ethan's head like an echo he couldn't quite believe. Marcus led him through the corridors to a space that made Ethan's throat tight. It wasn't huge, but it had a window, a real window with a view. A desk, a computer, shelves, a door that closed. His name was already on a placard outside. Ethan Cole, Senior Contract Analyst. "I'll let you settle in," Marcus said. "HR is down the hall when you're ready." He left Ethan alone in the office. Ethan sat in the chair, ergonomic, expensive, more comfortable than his mattress at home, and tried to process the fact that this was his. This space, this job, this future. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. "It's Vanessa. Thought you might need this." Below the message was a photo. Jamie's school, the front entrance, time-stamped at 3:07 today. "I'm having my driver pick Jamie up and bring him here. Hope that's okay. Wanted to meet the kid who inspired all this." Ethan stared at the message. The presumption should have annoyed him. You didn't just arrange to pick up someone's kid without asking first. But instead, he felt something else. Relief. Gratitude. The bone-deep knowledge that someone was actually seeing him, seeing his life, seeing what mattered. He texted back, "That's okay. Thank you." 3 dots appeared, then, "He's going to be so proud of you." Ethan set the phone down and looked out his window at the city sprawling below. Somewhere out there, Jamie was finishing 2nd grade, probably showing off his spaceship model, completely unaware that everything was about to change. And for the first time in 7 years, Ethan wasn't terrified of change. He was ready for it. The HR paperwork took longer than 45 minutes. Ethan sat across from a woman named Patricia, who looked like she'd been processing new employee forms since the invention of the photocopier. She walked him through benefits packages, tax withholdings, direct deposit information, emergency contacts. Every form felt like confirmation that this wasn't a dream. "Insurance kicks in immediately," Patricia said, sliding another document across the desk. "Medical, dental, vision, family coverage. Your son's pre-existing condition is fully covered with no waiting period." Ethan's pen paused over the signature line. "No waiting period?" "Executive-level benefits." Ms. Hale was very specific about that. Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Your son has asthma, correct?" "Severe asthma. He's been hospitalized twice." "Then you'll want to update his prescriptions through our pharmacy program. 0 copay on maintenance medications. The information packet has all the details." 0 copay. The words didn't feel real. Ethan signed the form. By the time he finished, it was nearly 3:30. Patricia handed him a badge with his name and photo. They'd pulled it from his old janitorial ID, which felt like a strange kind of poetry, and directed him back to his office. The space still didn't feel like his. Ethan stood in the doorway, half expecting someone to tell him there'd been a mistake, that this office belonged to someone important, but his name was still on the placard. The computer was humming softly on the desk. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. He sat down and opened the desk drawers. Empty, except for basic supplies, pens, notepads, paper clips. A whole life waiting to be filled in. His phone buzzed. Another text from Vanessa. "We're here, conference room B." Ethan's stomach flipped. Jamie was in the building. His 7-year-old son was about to see him in an office with his name on the door, about to meet the CEO who'd changed everything overnight. He stood, straightened his shirt, still the same shabby clothes from this morning, completely wrong for this environment, and headed down the hallway. Conference room B was smaller than the one from last night, with windows overlooking the city and a table that could seat maybe 10 people. Vanessa was there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking more relaxed than Ethan had seen her. And next to her, sitting in a chair that was too big for him, legs swinging, was Jamie. His son's eyes went wide when Ethan walked in. "Dad, you have an office, a real office with your name on it and everything." Ethan felt his throat close up. "Yeah, buddy, I do." Jamie launched himself out of the chair and crashed into Ethan with enough force to nearly knock him over. Ethan caught him, held him tight, felt the small, rapid heartbeat against his chest. "Ms. Hale showed me," Jamie said, words tumbling out in excitement. "She said you're going to work here now, and you won't have to clean floors anymore, and we can have dinner together every night. Is that true? Is it really true?" "It's true." Jamie pulled back just enough to look up at Ethan with those serious eyes. "Did you do something amazing?" Ethan glanced at Vanessa, who was watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I helped with a work problem, that's all." "He saved the company," Vanessa said. "Your dad is pretty remarkable, Jamie." Jamie beamed with pride so fierce it hurt to look at. "I know." "Why don't you show your dad what we've been working on?" Vanessa suggested. Jamie ran back to the table and grabbed his backpack. He pulled out the spaceship model with the careful reverence of someone handling treasure. "I showed everyone at school, and Marcus, my friend Marcus, not the grown-up Marcus, he said it was the coolest thing ever. And Ms. Hale said she likes Star Wars too." "Original trilogy only," Vanessa said. "The new ones don't count." "That's what my dad says." Jamie looked delighted to have found common ground. Ethan watched his son interact with Vanessa, this powerful CEO who could buy and sell companies with a phone call, and saw no trace of intimidation in Jamie's face, just a kid talking to an adult who was actually listening to him. "How was show and tell?" Ethan asked. "So good. Everyone loved the spaceship. Even Mrs. Palmer said it showed excellent attention to detail." Jamie set the model carefully on the table. "But then Tommy knocked it off my desk and one of the wings broke." Ethan's heart sank. They'd spent 2 weeks building that model together, salvaging money for supplies bit by bit. "Buddy, I'm sorry. We can try to fix it when we get home." "Ms. Hale already fixed it." Jamie pointed to the wing, which did look slightly different but fully attached. "She has super glue in her office. She said when you run a company, you need to be prepared for things that break." Vanessa shrugged. "It's a good metaphor." "What's a metaphor?" Jamie asked. "A comparison. A way of explaining one thing by talking about something else." "Oh, like when Dad says I eat like a vacuum cleaner?" "Exactly like that." Ethan pulled up a chair and sat down, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline from last night and this morning was wearing off, leaving behind the bone-deep fatigue of too little sleep and too much emotional whiplash. "You okay?" Vanessa asked. "Just tired. I only slept a couple hours." "Dad works nights," Jamie explained to Vanessa, "so he sleeps when I'm at school. Except today, he had to come here for his new job, so he didn't get much sleep." "That's going to change," Vanessa said. "Your dad's schedule is going to be a lot more normal now." "Does normal mean dinner together?" "Every night, if that's what you both want." Jamie looked at Ethan with hope so naked it was almost painful. Can we have dinner together every night?" "Yeah," Ethan managed. "We can do that." Jamie threw his arms around Ethan again. Over his son's head, Ethan met Vanessa's eyes. She nodded slightly, understanding passing between them without words. This was why. This moment, this kid, this chance at something better. "I need to get back to work," Vanessa said after a moment. "But Ethan, take the rest of the day. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you can start for real." "What time should I be here?" "Whatever works for you. 8, 9, 10. We'll figure out a rhythm." She stood and extended her hand to Jamie. "It was nice meeting you, Jamie. Your dad's lucky to have you." Jamie shook her hand with exaggerated seriousness. "He's the best dad ever." "I believe it." After Vanessa left, Ethan and Jamie sat in the conference room for a few more minutes. Jamie examined every corner with the wide-eyed wonder of a kid in a new place, asking questions about everything. "What's that thing on the wall? Why are the chairs so spinny? Can you see our apartment from here?" "No, buddy," Ethan said. "We're too far away." "But we could see it if we lived closer, right?" "Maybe." "Are we going to move now that you have a better job?" The question caught Ethan off guard. They'd been in the same apartment for 5 years, since Jamie was 2. It was shabby and cramped and in a rough neighborhood, but it was home. The thought of leaving felt strange and exciting and terrifying all at once. I don't know, Ethan said honestly. Would you want to move? Jamie considered this with the gravity of someone weighing major life decisions. I'd miss Mrs. Chen. She gives me cookies sometimes, but it would be cool to have my own room. And maybe we could get a dog. We'll see about the dog. That's what you always say when the answer is no. That's because I'm your dad, and I'm supposed to be mysterious. Jamie giggled. The sound was pure and perfect and reminded Ethan why every struggle of the past 7 years had been worth it. They took the subway home together, Jamie chattering the entire ride about his day, his friends, the spelling test he'd aced, the playground incident involving Tommy, and a disputed soccer ball. Normal kid stuff. Beautiful, ordinary, normal kid stuff. The apartment felt smaller than usual when they walked in. Ethan saw it through fresh eyes, the worn carpet, the peeling paint, the furniture held together with hope and duct tape. This had been enough when enough was all they could afford. But now everything was different. Can we order pizza? Jamie asked. The good kind with lots of cheese? The good kind meant delivery from the place 6 blocks away, not the frozen discs from the discount grocery store. Before yesterday, that would have been a luxury they couldn't afford on a random Wednesday. Yeah, Ethan said. We can get the good kind. While they waited for the pizza, Ethan called the number on the insurance packet Patricia had given him. A representative walked him through transferring Jamie's prescriptions to the company's pharmacy program. No copays, no prior authorizations, no fighting with insurance adjusters who seemed personally invested in denying every claim. Just medicine. Available. Simple. After he hung up, Ethan sat on the couch and let the weight of the day settle over him. Jamie was in his corner working on homework, tongue poking out in concentration the way he always did when he was focused. Everything looked the same, but nothing was the same. The pizza arrived. They ate it straight from the box, sitting on the couch with plates balanced on their laps, watching a nature documentary about whales. Jamie fell asleep halfway through with his head on Ethan's shoulder, a half-eaten slice still in his hand. Ethan carried his son to the couch bedroom, tucked him in, made sure the inhaler was within reach. He stood there for a long moment, watching Jamie sleep, feeling the fierce protective love that had driven every decision for 7 years. We're going to be okay, he whispered, both of us. He slept hard that night, dreamless and deep, and woke to his alarm at 7 feeling more rested than he had in months. Jamie was already awake, getting dressed for school with the focused determination of someone on a mission. I picked out your clothes, Jamie announced, pointing to a pile on Ethan's mattress. You need to look professional for your first real day. The outfit was a pair of khakis Ethan usually saved for parent-teacher conferences, and a button-down shirt that was only slightly wrinkled. Not exactly executive material, but better than his usual rotation of jeans and t-shirts. Thanks, buddy. Are you nervous? A little. Don't be. You're really smart. Everyone's going to see that now. The confidence in Jamie's voice made Ethan's chest tight. When had his kid become so wise? They went through the morning routine together. Breakfast, medication, backpack check. At the school gates, Jamie hugged Ethan tight. Good luck, Dad. You're going to be amazing. You too, buddy. Ethan watched Jamie disappear into the building, then headed downtown. The commute felt different in daylight. The subway was packed with professionals in suits carrying briefcases and coffee cups, absorbed in phones and newspapers. Ethan felt out of place in his khakis and wrinkled shirt, but he was going to the same place they were. He belonged now. The thought was still settling in when he walked through the front doors of Hale Industries. The security guard recognized him. Morning, Mr. Cole. Head on up, Mr. Cole. Not, hey, buddy, or excuse me, or the complete lack of acknowledgement he'd gotten for 3 years. Mr. Cole. The elevator ride to the 43rd floor felt faster than yesterday. When the doors opened, Marcus was waiting again. Ethan. Good, you're here. Vanessa wants to see you before you get started. Is something wrong? No, just a briefing. Follow me. Vanessa's office was at the end of the executive wing, behind double doors with her name in tasteful letters. Inside was a space that managed to be both impressive and functional. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive desk, shelves lined with books and industry awards, and a seating area that looked like it belonged in an expensive hotel lobby. Vanessa was at her desk, focused on her computer. She looked up when they entered. "Ethan, coffee?" "Sure." She poured from a carafe that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent and handed him a cup. "How's Jamie?" "Good. Excited that I'm working normal hours now." "I bet." Vanessa gestured to the chairs across from her desk. "Sit. We need to talk about what comes next." Ethan sat. Marcus remained standing by the door like a sentry. "I've spent the last 24 hours thinking about how to use your skills most effectively," Vanessa began. "We have 17 active international contracts that need review. 8 are in German, 4 in French, 3 in Mandarin, 2 in Spanish. I'm assuming you don't speak all of those languages." "German and Spanish. My French is conversational at best." "That's fine. We can hire translators for the others, but I want you overseeing the process, making sure they're actually doing the work properly, not just skimming summaries like our lawyers did with Reinhardt." "Okay. Beyond that, I want you working with HR on a talent audit. We have 3,000 employees in this company. I'm willing to bet at least a few of them are in the wrong positions or have skills we don't know about or are being completely wasted." She leaned forward. "You were invisible for 3 years. How many other invisible people are out there?" The question hung in the air. "Probably a lot," Ethan said quietly. "Exactly. So I want you to find them. Interview people. Look at resumes. Figure out who we're missing." Vanessa's expression was intense. "My father built this company on the idea that profits matter more than people. I'm trying to change that, but I can't do it alone." "Why me?" Ethan asked. "You barely know me. I know enough. You walked into that conference room knowing everyone would look down on you. You took a risk because it was the right thing to do. You saved us from a catastrophic mistake." She paused. "And you did it all while raising a kid alone and working 60-hour weeks for poverty wages. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Ethan felt heat crawl up his neck. Compliments had always made him uncomfortable. "There's something else," Vanessa continued. "Something I need you to understand. Not everyone here is going to like this. Richard has already started making noise about the janitor getting a promotion. Others will follow his lead. I figured. You're going to face resistance, questions about your qualifications, whispers that you only got this job because of one lucky night." Vanessa's eyes were hard. "I need to know you can handle that." "I've been invisible for 3 years, Ethan said. "I think I can handle being seen in a way people don't like." A smile flickered across Vanessa's face. "Good answer." She stood. "Marcus is going to get you set up with the contracts we need reviewed. Start with those. We'll schedule weekly check-ins to discuss progress and strategy." "Okay. And Ethan, if anyone gives you trouble, you come directly to me. I don't care if it's Richard or someone on the board or the janitor who replaced you. You report it, and I'll handle it." "Why are you doing all this?" The question came out before Ethan could stop it. "I mean, I get that I helped with the Reinhardt deal, but this feels like more than just gratitude." Vanessa was quiet for a moment, studying him. "My father ran this company like a dictatorship. Profit above everything. People were numbers on a spreadsheet. When he died and I took over, I wanted to change that. But changing corporate culture is like turning a battleship. Slow, difficult, and everyone fights you the whole way." She walked to the window, looking out over the city. "Then you walked into that conference room," she continued, "and you reminded me why I wanted to change things in the first place. Because there are talented people everywhere in every position at every level. But if we only see the ones in corner offices, we miss everyone else." She turned back to Ethan. "You're not just an employee to me. You're proof that I'm right, that this company can be better." The weight of that statement settled over Ethan like a coat he wasn't sure fit. "That's a lot of pressure," he said. "I know. Can you handle it?" Could he? Ethan thought about Jamie, about the years of struggle, about every time someone had looked through him like he wasn't there. He thought about the check that had changed everything, and the office with his name on it, and the chance to be something more than invisible. "Yeah," he said. "I can handle it." Marcus led him back to his office and dropped off 3 thick folders. "These are the German contracts we need reviewed. Take your time. Be thorough. Vanessa would rather you take a week and get it right than rush through in a day and miss something." After Marcus left, Ethan opened the first folder, a partnership agreement with a manufacturing firm in Stuttgart. Dense legal language, technical specifications, financial terms that made the Reinhardt contract look simple. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The morning passed in a blur of German text and careful notes. Ethan found his rhythm, the skills from college coming back like muscle memory. By noon, he'd made it through the first contract and identified 3 problematic clauses. Nothing as devastating as Reinhardt, but issues that could cause headaches down the line. His stomach growled. Ethan realized he'd skipped breakfast in his rush to get Jamie to school. He stood, stretched, and headed down the hallway toward what he hoped was a break room. He found it on the 3rd try. A large space with vending machines, tables, a coffee station, and a handful of employees on their lunch breaks. Conversation stopped when Ethan walked in. Eyes tracked him as he approached the vending machine. He could feel them staring, knew what they were thinking. The janitor, playing dress-up, acting like he belongs. Ethan fed coins into the machine and selected a sandwich that looked only slightly dried out. When he turned around, a woman was standing behind him. Mid-30s, sharp suit, expression like she'd just stepped in something unpleasant. "You're Ethan Cole," she said. "That's right." "The janitor who saved the company." Her tone suggested she didn't buy it. "I worked in facilities maintenance," Ethan said carefully. "Now I work in contract analysis." "Quite a jump." "I have a degree in legal translation. I was qualified for this position." "And yet you spent 3 years mopping floors." She crossed her arms. "That doesn't strike you as odd?" Every instinct told Ethan to walk away. But Vanessa's words echoed in his head. "You're proof that I'm right, that this company can be better." "It strikes me as what happens when people fall through the cracks," Ethan said. "When life gets hard and you take whatever job you can find to keep your kid fed and healthy. When no one bothers to ask if you might be capable of more." The woman's expression flickered. Something that might have been shame, quickly buried. "I'm sure you earned your position," she said in a tone that suggested the opposite. "Good luck." She walked away. The break room had gone completely silent, everyone watching. Ethan took his sandwich and left. Back in his office, he ate mechanically while reviewing the second contract. The woman's words kept playing in his head. The janitor who saved the company. Like it was a fairy tale, not something he'd actually done. This was going to be harder than he'd thought. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. "This is Richard Brennan. We need to talk. Conference room A, 2 p.m. Ethan stared at the message. Richard, the silver-haired executive who'd laughed at him, who'd made it clear he thought Ethan was a joke. Whatever this meeting was about, it wasn't going to be pleasant. He showed up at 2 o'clock sharp. Conference room A was the big one from his first night, where everything had started. Richard was already there, sitting at the head of the table like he owned the place. 2 other executives flanked him, a man and a woman, both looking like they'd been summoned for an execution. "Ethan," Richard said. "Thanks for coming. Sit." Ethan sat halfway down the table, maintaining distance. "I'll be direct," Richard continued. "There's concern among senior leadership about your position here." "What kind of concern?" "The kind where someone with no corporate experience and a questionable employment history suddenly gets promoted to a high-level position." Richard leaned back, fingers steepled. "It raises questions about favoritism, about qualifications, about whether proper vetting procedures were followed." "I was vetted," Ethan said. "I went through HR, signed all the paperwork. Everything was by the book. HR reports to Vanessa. If she wanted to fast-track you, they'd do exactly that." Richard's smile was cold. "I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying it looks suspicious." The woman executive spoke up. "We've reviewed your background. You have a degree in legal translation from a state school, graduated 15 years ago. No corporate experience, no references beyond your current position as," she consulted her notes, "facilities maintenance worker." "I was a janitor," Ethan said. "You can say it." "The point is," the male executive jumped in, "you're being put in a position that typically requires years of experience in corporate law. That's concerning." Ethan felt anger building in his chest, hot and tight. "I saved this company from signing a contract that would have destroyed it. I did that in 4 hours with no warning while everyone in that room stood around panicking. If that doesn't prove I'm qualified, I don't know what does." "One good night doesn't make a career," Richard said. "And frankly, we can't verify what you actually found in that contract. For all we know, you exaggerated the problems to make yourself look good. Then verify it. Have your lawyers review my summary. Check every page reference, see if I was lying. We have. Your summary was accurate. Richard's expression suggested this annoyed him. But that doesn't change the fact that you're a high-risk hire. Someone with your background, in a position of trust, it's a liability. The word hung in the air like an accusation. What exactly are you saying? Ethan asked quietly. I'm saying we want you to resign, quietly. We'll give you a severance package, say 6 months' salary. You walk away with more money than you've probably seen in your life, and we avoid the optics problem of having to fire you. The room was very still. Ethan thought about Jamie, about the apartment, about the medical bills that were finally miraculously paid. He thought about the office with his name on it, the contracts waiting for review, Vanessa's faith in him. He thought about being invisible again. No, he said. Richard blinked. Excuse me? No, I'm not resigning. I was hired to do a job, and I'm going to do it. You're making a mistake, the female executive said. This company has ways of dealing with employees who don't fit. You could make this easy on yourself. Or I could do my job and prove you all wrong. Ethan stood. Is there anything else? Richard's face had gone red. You're going to regret this. Maybe, but at least I'll regret it while doing work that matters. Ethan headed for the door. If you'll excuse me, I have contracts to review. He walked out before they could respond. Back in his office, Ethan's hands were shaking. He sat down hard in his chair and tried to process what had just happened. They'd tried to buy him off, tried to make him disappear again, and he'd said no. The enormity of it hit him all at once. He'd just made enemies of people who could make his life hell, people with power and connections and no reason to show mercy. But he'd also stood his ground, refused to be bullied, chosen to fight. His phone rang. Vanessa's name on the screen. Yeah? Richard just left my office looking like someone kicked his dog. What happened? Ethan told her about the meeting, the accusation of favoritism, the offer to resign, the thinly veiled threats. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. Then, those bastards. They said I'm a liability, high risk. They're scared. You represent change, and change threatens people like Richard who've built careers on the status quo. Vanessa's voice was hard. I'm calling an executive board meeting. This ends now. Vanessa, you don't have to. Yes, I do. They went after my employee. That's not acceptable. I can fight my own battles. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to fight them alone. She paused. Trust me on this, Ethan. Sometimes you need someone in your corner who can throw their weight around. After she hung up, Ethan sat in his office and stared at the contracts on his desk. This job was supposed to change his life. He hadn't expected it to turn into a war. But maybe that was naive. Maybe change always came with a fight. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Ethan tried to focus on the contracts, but his mind kept drifting to Richard's cold smile, the female executive's veiled threats, the weight of being watched and judged and found wanting by people who'd never bothered to see him before. At 3 o'clock, his phone buzzed with a reminder. Jamie's school pickup. Right. Ethan packed up his work and headed for the elevator. As he waited, footsteps approached from behind. Mr. Cole! He turned to find Marcus. The older man looked uncomfortable. I heard about the meeting with Richard, Marcus said quietly. I want you to know not everyone agrees with him. But some do. Some do, Marcus admitted. Change is hard, especially in a company like this, where hierarchy has been gospel for decades. He paused. But Vanessa's right. We need people like you, people who see things differently. Even if I'm a liability? You're only a liability to people who profit from keeping things broken. Marcus extended his hand. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Ethan shook his hand, throat tight. The subway ride to Jamie's school gave him time to decompose. By the time he reached the gates, he'd managed to push the day's chaos to the back of his mind. This was Jamie's time. His son deserved a father who was present, not distracted by corporate politics. Jamie came running out with his backpack bouncing, face lit up with excitement. Dad, you're here! You're actually here, and it's still daytime. Ethan caught him in a hug. I told you I would be. I know, but I didn't really believe it until now. Jamie pulled back, examining Ethan's face. How was your first real day? Complicated. What's that mean? It means some parts were good and some parts were hard. Jamie considered this with his usual seriousness. But you didn't quit? Nobody. I didn't quit. Good. Because quitting is for people who don't try hard enough. That's what Mrs. Palmer says. Ethan smiled despite everything. Mrs. Palmer's a smart lady. They walked home together through streets painted gold by late afternoon sun. Jamie talked about his day, the math test he'd aced, the book about dinosaurs the librarian had recommended, the argument at recess about whether Batman could beat Superman in a fight. Normal kid stuff. Grounding, necessary, real. At the apartment, they made dinner together. Not fancy, just spaghetti from a box and sauce from a jar, but they made it together, and that felt important. Jamie set the table while Ethan boiled water, both of them moving around the small kitchen in practiced coordination. They ate at their wobbly table, and Ethan asked about Jamie's friends, his favorite subjects, the book he was reading. He asked because he genuinely wanted to know, because these were the things that mattered more than contracts or corporate politics, or executives who thought he didn't belong. After dinner, they worked on homework together. Then they built more of Jamie's spaceship model, carefully gluing tiny pieces while Jamie narrated an elaborate story about the ship's adventures through space. At 8:30, Ethan tucked Jamie into bed. "Dad?" Jamie said sleepily. "Are you happy with your new job?" The question caught Ethan off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "You just seem different. Not bad different, just different." Ethan thought about his answer carefully. "I'm happy that I get to be with you more, that we can have dinner together and I can help with homework, that I don't have to worry as much about paying for your medicine." "But," smart kid, too smart sometimes. "But it's also scary," Ethan admitted. "New things usually are." "Is it scary like when Mom got sick? Or scary like the first day of school?" The comparison made Ethan's chest ache. "More like the first day of school. Scary because it's unknown, but maybe good. Once you get used to it." Jamie nodded, satisfied with this answer. "Okay, I think you'll be good at your job. You're good at lots of things." "Like what?" "Like building spaceships, and making spaghetti, and being my dad." Jamie's eyes were already closing. "That's the most important one." Ethan stayed until Jamie's breathing evened out into sleep. Then he sat on the couch and pulled out his laptop, his old, beaten-up personal one, not the sleek company computer still sitting in his office. He needed to understand what he was up against. An hour of research revealed what he'd suspected. Richard Brennan was old guard, 30 years with the company, VP of operations, with enough power and connections to make problems disappear. The other two executives from the meeting had similar pedigrees. They were entrenched, protected, and very good at corporate warfare. Ethan was none of those things. But he had something they didn't. He had nothing to lose. They were fighting to maintain power. He was fighting to survive. That had to count for something. His phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. "Board meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. You'll be there. Wear something professional if you have it." Ethan looked at his closet. The khakis and button-down were the best he had. Everything else was jeans and t-shirts, work clothes from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. He texted back, "I'll be there. Fair warning, my wardrobe is limited." 3 dots appeared, then, "We'll fix that. For now, just show up. I've got your back." Ethan set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd be in a room full of executives who saw him as a problem to be solved. Tomorrow he'd have to prove he belonged again to people who'd already decided he didn't. Tomorrow was going to be brutal. But he'd survived worse. He'd survived watching his wife die. Survived years of poverty and exhaustion and being invisible. Survived nights when he wasn't sure they'd make it another month. He could survive this too. Ethan woke at 5 in the morning with his heart racing and no memory of the nightmare that had pulled him from sleep. The apartment was dark and quiet except for Jamie's soft breathing from across the room. He lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to slow his pulse, trying not to think about the board meeting in 5 hours. It didn't work. By 5:30, he gave up on sleep and headed to the shower. The water was cold again. The building's ancient heating system barely functioned on the best days, but the shock of it helped clear his head. He stood under the icy stream and ran through scenarios for the meeting, trying to prepare for questions he couldn't anticipate from people who wanted him gone. At 6, he made coffee with the cheap instant stuff that tasted like burnt rubber, but had enough caffeine to jumpstart a corpse. He sat at the wobbly table in the dim pre-dawn light and thought about calling in sick, about walking away from all of this before it got worse. But then Jamie appeared in the doorway, hair sticking up in every direction, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You're up early," Jamie said, voice thick with sleep. "Big day at work." Jamie shuffled over and climbed into Ethan's lap, something he hadn't done in months. Too old for it, usually. But this morning he folded himself against Ethan's chest like he had when he was small, and Ethan wrapped his arms around his son and breathed in the smell of kid shampoo and sleepy warmth. "Are you scared?" Jamie asked. "Yeah, buddy, a little." "But you're still going to go?" "Yeah." "Because that's what brave people do," Jamie said with absolute certainty. "They get scared, but they do the thing anyway. Mrs. Palmer told us that." Ethan smiled despite the knot in his stomach. "Mrs. Palmer is very wise." They sat like that for a while, quiet and still, until Jamie's breathing evened out and Ethan realized his son had fallen back asleep. He carried Jamie back to the couch bed and tucked him in, watching the rise and fall of his small chest. This was why. Whatever happened today, this was why it mattered. At 7:30, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. "Meeting my driver at your building at 8:30. He'll bring you downtown. Don't argue." Ethan texted back, "I can take the subway." 3 dots, then, "You're about to walk into a room full of sharks. Show up looking like you belong there. That means arriving in the company car." He wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some independence, some sense that he wasn't being managed or controlled. But Vanessa was right. Optics mattered, especially today. "Okay," he typed. "Thank you." At 8, Jamie was up for real, moving through his morning routine with sleepy efficiency. Ethan made breakfast and watched his son eat, acutely aware that in an hour he'd be fighting for the job that made mornings like this possible. "You look nice," Jamie said, studying Ethan's outfit. The same khakis and button-down from yesterday, the best he had. "Thanks, buddy." Are those people from yesterday still being mean? Ethan had mentioned the confrontation with Richard in vague terms, not wanting to worry Jamie, but also not wanting to lie. "Some of them, yeah. That's dumb. You're really smart and good at your job. They should see that." "Not everyone sees things the same way." Jamie frowned, processing this. "If they fire you, will you be sad?" "Yeah, but we'll be okay either way. I promise." It was a promise Ethan wasn't entirely sure he could keep, but Jamie needed the reassurance. Needed to know that whatever happened, his dad would figure it out. At 8:20, they headed downstairs. The black town car was already waiting at the curb, so out of place in their neighborhood that Mrs. Chen from next door was staring at it through her window. The driver got out, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. "Mr. Cole, I'm Robert. Ms. Hale sent me." "This is so cool," Jamie breathed. "Dad, you have a driver." "Just for today, buddy." "Still cool." Robert opened the back door. "We need to drop your son at school first?" "Yeah, Lincoln Elementary, about 15 minutes from here." "I know it. Let's go." The interior of the car was nicer than Ethan's entire apartment. Leather seats, climate control, enough legroom to stretch out. Jamie was vibrating with excitement, touching everything, asking Robert a million questions about the car and how long he'd been a driver and whether he'd ever driven anyone famous. Robert answered every question with patience and good humor, and Ethan felt a wave of gratitude for this stranger who was making his son's morning magical. At the school, Jamie hugged Ethan tight. "Good luck, Dad. Show them you're amazing." "I'll try." "You will. I know you will." Ethan watched Jamie run toward the school building, backpack bouncing, and felt his throat close up. Whatever happened in the next few hours would shape the rest of their lives. The weight of that was almost crushing. "He's a good kid," Robert said as they pulled away from the curb. "The best." "Ms. Hale mentioned he has asthma. Severe?" "Yeah, we've had some close calls." Robert nodded. "My daughter had it too. She's 25 now, completely outgrew it." "There's hope." The kindness in his voice made Ethan's chest ache. "Thanks for saying that." They drove in comfortable silence for a while. The city shifted around them from Ethan's rough neighborhood to increasingly upscale streets, The transition so gradual he almost didn't notice until they were surrounded by boutiques and cafes that charged $10 for coffee. "Can I give you some advice?" Robert asked as they approached downtown. "Please. I've been driving for Ms. Hale for 3 years. I've seen a lot of executives come through that car. Board members, investors, the whole hierarchy." He caught Ethan's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Most of them are more interested in looking important than being competent. You're the opposite. Don't let them make you forget that. They want me gone." "I know. Ms. Hale told me about the situation." Robert pulled up to the Hale Industries building. "But here's the thing about sharks. They're dangerous in deep water. On land, they suffocate. You're not in their world anymore. You're in a world where actual skill matters. Use that." Ethan sat with those words for a moment. "Thank you, Robert." "Good luck, Mr. Cole. I'll be waiting when you're done." The building felt different this morning. More hostile, maybe. Or maybe Ethan was just projecting his own anxiety onto glass and steel. He rode the elevator to the 43rd floor with 3 other people who pointedly ignored him, staring at their phones like he didn't exist. Being invisible again, just in a different way. Vanessa was waiting outside the conference room. She took one look at Ethan and her expression shifted. "Come with me." She led him to her office and gestured to a garment bag hanging on the back of her door. "Put that on." "Vanessa, you don't have to." "It's not about have to. It's about not letting them dismiss you because of your clothes." She turned around to give him privacy. "I had my assistant pick it up this morning. Should be your size." Ethan unzipped the bag. Inside was a suit. Charcoal gray, well-made, the kind of thing he'd never been able to afford. The shirt was crisp white, the tie a muted blue. Shoes, too, leather and polished. He changed quickly, hyper-aware of Vanessa standing with her back turned just feet away. The suit fit almost perfectly, like it had been tailored for him. "Okay," he said. Vanessa turned and her eyebrows rose slightly. "That's better. You look like you belong in that boardroom. I feel like I'm playing dress-up." "Good. Fake it until it's real. That's what half of them are doing anyway." She adjusted his tie with quick, efficient movements. "Listen to me. They're going to try to intimidate you, make you feel small, question your credentials, your experience, your right to be here. Don't engage, don't defend, just state facts." "What if they ask questions I can't answer?" "Then you say you don't know, and you'll find out. Honesty is more valuable than bullshit confidence." Vanessa stepped back, assessing him. "You saved this company, Ethan. Remember that. Whatever they throw at you, you're the one who caught what everyone else missed. Why are you doing this?" The question came out rougher than Ethan intended. "You barely know me. You're putting your credibility on the line for someone who might fail." Vanessa's expression softened slightly. "You want the honest answer?" "Yeah, because my father built this company on the backs of people he considered disposable. He made billions while paying poverty wages and convincing everyone that hierarchy was merit." She looked away. "I watched him destroy lives and call it business. When he died and left me this company, I swore I'd do it differently. But changing culture is hard, really hard. And then you walked into that conference room and proved that talent exists everywhere, that we've been blind to it because we weren't looking." She met Ethan's eyes again. "You're not just an employee, you're proof that I'm right, that this company can value people instead of using them. So yeah, I'm putting my credibility on the line. Because if I can't protect someone who deserves protection, what's the point of having this job?" Ethan didn't know what to say to that. The raw honesty in Vanessa's voice had stripped away all the corporate polish, leaving something real and vulnerable. "Thank you," he managed. "Don't thank me yet. Let's get through this meeting first." She checked her watch. "We're up in 5 minutes. Ready?" "No," Vanessa smiled. "Good. Neither are they." The boardroom was on the 45th floor, a space Ethan had only ever cleaned. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 30, and chairs that probably cost more than his car. 12 people were already seated when Ethan and Vanessa walked in. Richard was there, of course, and the 2 executives from yesterday's ambush. But there were others too, men and women in expensive suits, carrying the weight of authority and decades of corporate power. They looked up when Ethan entered, and he saw the calculation in their eyes. Most of them had never noticed him during his 3 years mopping their floors. Now they were seeing him for the first time, and they weren't happy about it. "Good morning," Vanessa said, taking her seat at the head of the table. She gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Ethan, sit here." The power move wasn't subtle. By putting Ethan next to her at the head of the table, Vanessa was making a statement. This wasn't an employee being called to account. This was a colleague being defended. Ethan sat. The chair was more comfortable than anything he'd ever owned. "Let's begin," Vanessa said. "Richard, you called this meeting. You have the floor." Richard stood, and Ethan recognized the posture of someone preparing for battle. "Thank you, Vanessa. I'll be direct. This board has serious concerns about the recent hiring of Ethan Cole." "What concerns?" "Background, primarily. Mr. Cole has no corporate experience, no relevant work history beyond a degree from 15 years ago, and no references that would support a position at his current level." Richard's tone was measured, reasonable, deadly. Furthermore, his rapid promotion from facilities maintenance to senior analyst raises questions about proper vetting procedures. "I vetted him personally," Vanessa said, "based on a single night of work. With all due respect, that's not sufficient basis for a hire at this level." One of the other board members spoke up, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone used to being obeyed. "I've reviewed the personnel file. Mr. Cole's degree is from a state university, not a top-tier institution. His grades were adequate, but not exceptional. And there's a 7-year gap in his resume where he worked exclusively in low-skilled positions." Low-skilled. The phrase hit Ethan like a slap. 3 years of night shifts, of being invisible, reduced to 2 words dripping with contempt. "May I respond?" Ethan asked quietly. Richard looked annoyed. "This is a board meeting, not a deposition." "He's sitting at this table," Vanessa said. "He gets to speak." All eyes turned to Ethan. He felt his pulse hammering, but kept his voice steady. "You're right about my resume," he said. "State school, average grades, 7 years in jobs you'd call low-skilled. But here's what that resume doesn't show. My wife died when our son was 6 months old, cancer. The medical bills bankrupted us. I needed work immediately, something with health insurance and steady hours that wouldn't interfere with taking care of an infant." The room was silent. "I took the first job that offered those things," Ethan continued. "Facilities maintenance, night shift. It wasn't my dream. It wasn't my skill set. It was survival. And I did it for 7 years because my son needed me to." "That's very touching," Richard said. "But it doesn't qualify you for this position." "No. What qualifies me is that I speak fluent German, that I can analyze complex legal contracts and identify traps that your lawyers missed, that I saved this company from a deal that would have cost you $50 million minimum." Ethan looked around the table. "I did that in 4 hours with no warning. Your legal team had weeks and they didn't catch it." The steel-haired woman leaned forward. "One success doesn't establish a pattern of competence." "Then let me establish one. Give me 30 days. Let me review the other contracts Ms. Hale mentioned. Let me prove this wasn't luck." "And if you can't," Richard asked, "then I'll resign. No severance, no complaints. I'll walk away." Vanessa's head snapped toward him. "Ethan, it's fair," Ethan said. "They don't trust me. I get it, so let me earn that trust." Another board member spoke, a younger man, maybe 40, with the kind of tan that came from yacht clubs and golf courses. "What makes you think you can transition from janitorial work to contract analysis? The skill sets aren't remotely comparable." "They're more comparable than you'd think," Ethan said. "Janitors see everything. We're invisible, so people act like we're not there. I've walked through this building for 3 years watching how it really works. Who's competent and who's faking it? Which departments are functional and which are disasters? What gets prioritized and what gets ignored?" He paused, gathering his thoughts. "You want to know if I can do this job? I'll tell you what I learned in 3 years of being invisible. I learned that your facilities department is understaffed by 30% because someone in accounting decided labor costs needed to be cut. I learned that your IT support is overwhelmed because half the executives refuse to follow basic security protocols and create constant emergencies. I learned that your executive assistants are doing twice the work they're paid for because their bosses delegate everything and take credit for all of it." The room had gone very quiet. "I learned that this company has talented people at every level who are being wasted because nobody bothers to look beyond job titles. And I learned that contracts like the Reinhardt deal don't get caught because everyone assumes someone else is doing the hard work of actually reading them. Ethan met Richard's eyes. So yeah, I think I can do this job, because I've been watching you all fail at it for 3 years. The silence that followed was profound. Richard's face had gone red. That's insubordinate. It's honest, Vanessa said, which is more than I can say for most of what gets said in this room. She looked around the table. Ethan's offer is fair, 30 days to prove himself. We review his work at the end of the month. If it's not up to standard, he walks away. No harm, no foul. And if his work causes problems in the meantime, the steel-haired woman asked. I'll supervise his output personally, Vanessa said. Nothing goes to clients or partners without my review. We're not taking blind risks here. The board members exchanged glances. Ethan could see the calculation happening, the weighing of options and political consequences. Finally, the younger man spoke. I can support a 30-day trial period, with the understanding that we reserve the right to terminate earlier if major issues arise. I can't support this at all, Richard said. It sets a terrible precedent. We can't just promote people based on one lucky break. It wasn't luck, Ethan said quietly. It was skill you didn't know I had because you never bothered to look. Richard's jaw tightened. You're out of line. Maybe, but I'm also right. Enough. Vanessa's voice cut through the tension. Let's vote. All in favor of giving Ethan a 30-day trial period with full supervisory review? 7 hands went up. Not a majority of the full board, but enough given who was present. Opposed? Richard and 3 others raised their hands. Motion carries, Vanessa said. Ethan stays for 30 days. We reconvene at the end of the month to review his performance. She looked at Ethan. Don't make me regret this. I won't. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out, some avoiding eye contact with Ethan, others shooting him looks ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Richard stopped at the door and turned back. 30 days, he said to Ethan, then you're gone. We'll see. After Richard left, only Vanessa and Ethan remained in the massive boardroom. That was risky, Vanessa said. The 30-day offer? All of it? Calling out the board's failures. Basically telling Richard he's incompetent to his face. She stood and walked to the windows. You made enemies in there. I already had enemies. True, but now they're motivated. Vanessa turned back to him. You understand what you just committed to? 30 days to prove you're not a fluke. They'll be watching everything you do, looking for any excuse to say you failed. I know. And you're okay with that? Ethan thought about Jamie, about the apartment, about the 7 years he'd spent invisible. I'm tired of being counted out before I get a chance to try. If I fail, at least it'll be because I actually failed, not because someone decided I wasn't worth the opportunity. Vanessa smiled, but it was sad around the edges. You remind me why I wanted this job. Before the board meetings and the politics and the constant fighting to change things that should have been fixed years ago. Why did you want it? The job, I mean. You could have sold the company after your father died, taken the money and done anything. I thought about it for about 5 minutes. Vanessa leaned against the window. But my father spent 40 years building something that hurt people, paid poverty wages, cut corners on safety, treated employees like they were replaceable, and everyone praised him for it. Called him a genius, a visionary. She looked out at the city sprawling below. I wanted to prove you could run a company differently, that you could be profitable without being cruel, that valuing people wasn't just good ethics, it was good business. She laughed, but without humor. Turns out that's a lot harder than it sounds. You're doing it, Ethan said. You gave me a chance when no one else would have. One person in a company of 3,000. It's a start. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Then she straightened and her professional mask slid back into place. Okay, enough philosophy. You've got 29 days to prove yourself. Let's not waste time. They spent the next hour going over the contracts Ethan needed to review. Vanessa explained the context for each one, the business relationships involved, the strategic importance. Her mind was sharp and fast, jumping between details and big-picture implications with ease. Ethan understood why she was CEO. It wasn't just inherited wealth or family connections. Vanessa was brilliant, driven, and genuinely cared about doing this right. Questions? She asked when they'd covered the basics. Yeah, how do I handle it when people undermine me? And they will. Document everything. Keep records of your work, your findings, your communications. If someone tries to say you screwed up, you'll have proof you didn't. Vanessa's expression was serious. And Ethan, don't let them isolate you. Build relationships with people who aren't part of Richard's circle. The company is bigger than the executive floor. Like who? Start with Marcus. He's neutral territory, works with everyone, trusted by most. Then branch out. Talk to department heads, analysts, people doing actual work instead of just managing it. She paused. And talk to the janitors, the security guards, the people you used to work with. They see everything, and they'll tell you things the executives never will. The idea of going back to his old coworkers felt strange, like visiting a past life. Okay, Ethan said. I can do that. Good. Now get out of here. You've got work to do, and I've got 3 calls with investors who are going to ask uncomfortable questions about why we canceled the Reinhardt deal. Ethan stood. Vanessa, thank you for defending me in there. Thank me by being so good they can't deny it. That's the best revenge. Back in his office, Ethan shed the suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. The contracts were waiting, dense and complex and full of potential traps. He had 30 days to prove he belonged here. He got to work. The morning disappeared into German legal terminology and careful analysis. Ethan worked through the first contract with meticulous attention, flagging questionable clauses and making notes on everything that seemed unusual. By noon, he'd completed 1 full review and started on the second. His phone rang, an internal number he didn't recognize. This is Ethan. Mr. Cole? This is Jennifer in accounting. Ms. Hale asked me to set up your expense account and direct deposit information. Do you have a few minutes? Sure. Jennifer walked him through paperwork that felt surreal. An expense account, direct deposit with a salary that still didn't seem real when he saw it in writing, benefits that would cover Jamie's medication without co-pays or prior authorizations. Is there anything else you need? Jennifer asked. Actually, yeah. Do you know where I can find James Martinez? He works night shift in facilities. A pause. The janitors? I think they have a break room in the basement, but I'm not sure when. That's okay. I'll figure it out. Thanks, Jennifer. After he hung up, Ethan sat with the idea for a moment. Then he grabbed his badge and headed for the elevator. The basement of Hale Industries was a different world from the executive floors. Fluorescent lights, concrete floors, the smell of cleaning chemicals and institutional food. Ethan knew this space intimately from 3 years of night shifts. The break room was exactly where he remembered. He pushed through the door and found 4 people sitting at a table scattered with coffee cups and half-eaten lunches. They looked up, and Ethan saw recognition dawn on their faces. Ethan? James Martinez stood, confusion written all over him. Man, what are you doing down here? I heard you got promoted or something. I did. Senior contract analyst. No shit. That's wild. James looked Ethan up and down, taking in the dress shirt and slacks. You look different, all professional. Feels weird. Another janitor spoke up. Maria, who'd worked the same shift as Ethan for 2 years. So you're just here slumming it? Remembering us little people? There was an edge in her voice, and Ethan understood it. He'd been one of them yesterday. Today he was wearing clothes that cost more than they made in a week. I'm here because I need help, Ethan said, and because you all know things that people upstairs don't. Like what? James asked, sitting back down. Like how this company actually works. Who does real work and who just talks about it, where the problems are that nobody fixes. Maria crossed her arms. Why do you care? You got your ticket out. Because I have 30 days to prove I deserve it, and if I fail, I'm back to where I started. Ethan pulled up a chair. I'm not asking you to like me. I'm asking you to help me understand what I'm up against. The 4 janitors exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, James spoke. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with who I should trust and who I shouldn't. For the next 45 minutes, they talked. The janitors told Ethan about department politics, about executives who were competent versus those who were just good at taking credit, about which managers treated staff like humans and which ones didn't bother learning their names. They told him about the IT director who stayed late helping employees with computer problems, even though it wasn't his job. About the HR manager who'd quietly been fighting for better wages for support staff. About the finance executive who'd been cooking numbers for years and nobody had caught it yet. Wait, Ethan said. Cooking numbers? Like fraud? Like creative accounting, Maria said. But yeah, probably fraud. He's been doing it for years. Upper management doesn't care as long as the quarterly reports look good. Who is it? David Chen, VP of Finance. Real piece of work. James leaned forward. But you didn't hear that from us. We're just janitors. Nobody listens to us. Ethan thought about that. About how much information existed in the spaces between official channels, in the people who cleaned offices and heard conversations and saw documents left carelessly on desks. I'm listening, he said, and I'll look into it. Be careful, Maria warned. Chen has friends in high places. You go after him, you'll make more enemies. I already have enemies. What's one more? After he left the break room, Ethan stood in the basement hallway for a moment, processing everything he'd learned. Then he headed back to his office with a list of names and a growing understanding that this company had more problems than just bad contracts. The afternoon passed in focused work. Ethan completed the second contract review and started on the third, finding issues in both that would need to be addressed before signing. Nothing as catastrophic as Reinhardt, but enough to save the company money and headaches. At 3, he packed up and headed out to pick up Jamie. Robert was waiting with the car, as promised. How'd it go? Robert asked as they pulled away from the curb. I've got 30 days to prove I'm not a fraud. That's better than 0 days. True. They rode in comfortable silence. Robert seemed to understand that Ethan needed space to think, to decompress from the intensity of the day. At Jamie's school, his son came running out with his usual enthusiasm, face lighting up when he saw the car. The fancy car's back. Does this mean you didn't get fired? Not yet, buddy. That's good. Getting fired would be bad. Jamie climbed in and immediately started telling Robert about his day, about the science project they were starting, about the lizard that had gotten loose in the classroom and caused chaos. Ethan listened to his son's chatter and felt some of the tension drain from his shoulders. This was real. This mattered. Everything else was just noise. At the apartment, Ethan changed out of the suit and into jeans and a t-shirt. The transformation felt like shedding skin, returning to something more familiar. He made dinner while Jamie did homework. They ate together at their wobbly table. They built more of the spaceship model. Normal evening, normal routine, except everything underneath had shifted. After Jamie was asleep, Ethan pulled out his laptop and started researching David Chen. The VP of Finance had an impeccable resume, a Wikipedia page, and a profile that made him look like a corporate success story. But if what the janitors said was true, Chen was committing fraud right under everyone's noses. Ethan knew he should leave it alone. Focus on his contracts, prove himself in the narrow lane he'd been given. Going after a VP of Finance would be suicide for someone in his position. But he also knew that if he stayed silent about fraud, he was complicit. And he hadn't fought this hard to get here just to become part of the problem. He pulled up the company's financial reports and started reading. It was going to be a long night. 3 weeks into his 30-day trial, Ethan had reviewed 11 contracts and found problems in 9 of them. Nothing catastrophic like Reinhardt, but enough to save Hale Industries over $12 million in liability exposure and unfavorable terms. He documented everything meticulously, built a paper trail that even Richard couldn't dispute. But the David Chen problem kept him awake at night. The financial reports showed patterns that didn't add up. Revenue streams that appeared and disappeared. Expenses categorized in ways that made no sense. It was subtle. The kind of thing that would look fine if you weren't specifically looking for fraud. But Ethan had spent 3 years watching this company from the outside, and he knew what normal looked like. This wasn't normal. The problem was proof. Financial records were complicated, and Chen had been doing this long enough to be good at hiding his tracks. Ethan needed someone who understood corporate accounting better than he did. He thought about the IT director the janitors had mentioned, the one who stayed late helping people even though it wasn't his job. Someone like that might be willing to help, if approached carefully. Ethan found him on a Thursday evening, still in his office at 7:30 when most of the building had emptied out. Thomas Park, according to the nameplate. Early 40s, wearing a hoodie under his blazer, surrounded by computer monitors displaying code and system diagnostics. Ethan knocked on the open door. Thomas Park? Thomas looked up, surprised. Yeah, can I help you? I'm Ethan Cole. Contract analyst, I was hoping I could ask you some questions. Recognition flickered across Thomas's face. You're the janitor everyone's talking about. The one who caught the Reinhardt deal. Former janitor, and yeah, that's me. Come in. Fair warning, my office is a disaster. Thomas gestured to the chairs buried under computer equipment and technical manuals. I'd offer you a seat, but as you can see, that's complicated. Ethan moved a stack of manuals and sat. I need help with something sensitive. The kind of thing that could get me fired if I'm wrong. Thomas's expression grew cautious. I'm listening. I think someone in finance is cooking the books, but I don't know enough about corporate accounting to prove it. I was hoping you might know someone who does. Who do you think is doing it? David Chen. Thomas went very still. That's a serious accusation. I know. That's why I need to be sure before I take it to anyone official. Why come to me? Because people tell me you're one of the good ones, someone who actually cares about doing the right thing. Ethan leaned forward. And because IT sees everything, if Chen's been manipulating records, there might be digital traces. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, thinking. What made you suspicious? Ethan explained the patterns he'd noticed, the revenue streams that didn't match up, the expense categories that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify. Thomas listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious. I can't access financial records without authorization, Thomas said finally. That would be a violation of protocol and probably illegal. I understand. But Thomas pulled up something on one of his monitors. I can look at system logs, see who's accessing what, when they're doing it, whether there are unusual patterns. He typed for a moment. Hypothetically. Ethan watched as lines of data scrolled across the screen. Most of it was meaningless to him, but Thomas seemed to know exactly what he was looking for. Hypothetically, Thomas said slowly, if someone were manipulating financial records, they'd need to access the system outside of normal audit windows. Late at night, weekends, times when oversight is minimal. And hypothetically, there's a user account that's been accessing the financial database at 2 and 3 in the morning multiple times a week for the past 18 months. Thomas highlighted several entries. Always the same files, revenue reports, expense ledgers, quarterly summaries. Can you tell what changes were made? Not without actually accessing the files, which again, I can't do without authorization. Thomas looked at Ethan. But I can tell you this user account belongs to David Chen, and the access pattern is consistent with someone who doesn't want their work seen by the finance team during normal hours. It wasn't proof, but it was evidence, enough to justify taking this higher. Can you document what you just showed me? Ethan asked. In a way that doesn't implicate you for looking. I can generate a routine system security report that includes unusual access patterns. It's part of my job to monitor for potential security breaches. Thomas started typing. This would definitely qualify as unusual. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Chen has friends. If you go after him, it's going to get ugly. It's already ugly. At least this way it might be honest. Thomas printed the report and handed it to Ethan. Be careful. People like Chen don't go down quietly. Ethan took the report back to his office and added it to the file he'd been building. Then he did something that scared him more than anything else he'd done since walking into that conference room 3 weeks ago. He called Vanessa. She answered on the second ring. Ethan, it's 8 o'clock. Please tell me you're not still at the office. I am, and I need to talk to you about something that can't wait. A pause. How serious? Potential fraud, VP level. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Vanessa arrived in 19 wearing jeans and a sweater that made her look younger and more human than her usual corporate armor. She listened while Ethan walked her through everything, the patterns in the financial reports, the conversations with the janitors, the system access logs from Thomas. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. This is going to explode, she said finally. If Chen's really been committing fraud for 18 months, the board will lose their minds. The investors will panic. We'll have regulatory investigations, potential lawsuits, a media nightmare. I know. And you're sure about this? Because if you're wrong, your career here is over. Probably mine too. Ethan thought about Jamie, about the apartment, about everything he'd risked to get here. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure enough that staying silent feels wrong. Vanessa nodded slowly. Okay, here's what we do. I bring this to the board tomorrow with your evidence. We authorize a formal audit before confronting Chen. If the audit confirms fraud, we move forward. If it doesn't, we figure out where the analysis went wrong. What happens to me if I'm wrong? Probably nothing good. Richard will use it as proof you're not qualified. The board will question my judgment for believing you. Your 30 days will end badly. And if I'm right, then you'll have exposed fraud that could have cost this company hundreds of millions. You'll be untouchable. Vanessa met his eyes. But Ethan, you need to understand. Either way, this changes everything. You can't go back to being invisible after this. I don't want to be invisible anymore. Good, because tomorrow morning you're going to be the most visible person in this building. The board meeting was scheduled for 9. Ethan spent the night at the office, double-checking his analysis, making sure every piece of evidence was documented and defensible. At some point, he dozed off at his desk, waking to the sound of his phone alarm at 6:30. He called Jamie from the office. His son answered sleepily. "Dad, where are you?" "Still at work, buddy. I'm sorry. I had something important to finish." "Are you in trouble?" "No, but today's going to be intense. Mrs. Chen is going to pick you up from school and watch you until I get home, okay?" "Okay." Jamie's voice was small. "Dad, are you scared?" Ethan thought about lying, about being the strong father who never showed fear, but Jamie deserved honesty. "Yeah, buddy, I'm scared. But sometimes you have to do scary things because they're right. Like when you walked into that meeting the first time." "Exactly like that. Then you'll be okay. You were brave then, and you're brave now." The simple faith in his son's voice made Ethan's throat tight. "I love you, Jamie." "Love you too, Dad. Do the scary thing good." After he hung up, Ethan sat in his office watching the sunrise paint the city gold. In 3 hours, he'd be accusing a VP of fraud in front of the board. In 3 hours, his 30-day trial would effectively end one way or another. He'd never been more terrified. At 8:30, Vanessa appeared at his door. "Ready?" "No." "Good. The best decisions are usually the ones that scare us." She handed him a cup of coffee. "Drink this. You look like hell." "I spent the night here. I figured. Come on, let's go change some lives." The boardroom was packed. Not just the usual attendees, but additional executives, legal counsel, even some investors who'd been called in. Richard was there, looking smug. David Chen sat near the front, relaxed and confident, probably wondering why he'd been summoned. Ethan took a seat next to Vanessa. His hands were shaking slightly, so he clasped them under the table where no one could see. "This is unusual," Richard said, looking around. "What's this about, Vanessa?" "We have a serious matter to address. Ethan has uncovered evidence of potential financial fraud." The room erupted. Questions shouted over each other, voices raised in disbelief and anger. Vanessa held up a hand, waiting for silence. "Ethan will present his findings. I want everyone to listen before jumping to conclusions." All eyes turned to Ethan. He stood, legs unsteady, and walked to the front of the room. The presentation he'd prepared was loaded on the screen. Deep breath, no turning back now. 3 weeks ago, I was told something by employees who had no reason to lie, Ethan began. They said someone in finance had been manipulating records. I didn't want to believe it, but I looked into it anyway. He clicked to the first slide showing the revenue discrepancies. These are quarterly revenue reports from the past 18 months. Notice how these specific revenue streams appear in Q2, disappear in Q3, then reappear in Q4 under different categorizations. Same amounts, different labels. It's a shell game. David Chen stood abruptly. "This is absurd. Those are legitimate accounting adjustments for international transactions. Anyone with basic financial knowledge would understand that." "Sit down, David," Vanessa said quietly. "You'll have your chance to respond." Chen sat, but his expression had gone from relaxed to hostile. Ethan continued through the presentation, showing expense patterns, the late-night system access, the connections between manipulated records and Chen's user account. With each slide, the room grew quieter. Even Richard had stopped smiling. When Ethan finished, the silence was crushing. The head of legal, a sharp woman named Catherine Wu, spoke first. "These are serious allegations. Do we have independent verification?" "Not yet," Vanessa said. "That's why we're here. I'm requesting board authorization for an immediate forensic audit of all financial records David Chen has accessed in the past 2 years. That's harassment, Chen snapped. This is clearly a witch hunt orchestrated by someone with no understanding of corporate finance. He pointed at Ethan. This man is a janitor playing analyst. He doesn't have the credentials to make these accusations. Former janitor, Ethan said. And I may not have credentials in accounting, but I know how to read patterns. I know when something doesn't add up. And your records don't add up. Then explain the revenue adjustments, Chen challenged. If you're so smart, explain why legitimate international accounting would look suspicious to you. Ethan had prepared for this. Because international transactions require currency conversion records, customs documentation, and bank transfer confirmations. Those supporting documents don't exist for these revenue streams. I checked. Chen's face paled slightly. Catherine Wu leaned forward. You checked documentation? How? I requested them from accounting as part of my contract review work. Told them I needed to verify financial capacity for partnership agreements. Ethan pulled out a folder. They sent me everything they had, or rather, everything they didn't have, no supporting docs for any of these transactions. He slid the folder to Catherine, who began flipping through it with increasingly sharp focus. This is circumstantial, Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. It could be sloppy record-keeping. For 18 months? Across multiple quarters? All involving the same executive? Vanessa shook her head. I don't buy it. I'm calling for a vote. All in favor of authorizing a forensic audit? 12 hands went up. Only Richard and 2 others abstained. Motion carries, Vanessa said. Catherine, I want the audit started immediately. David, you're suspended pending the results. Chen stood, his chair scraping back with a harsh sound. You'll regret this. All of you. When the audit proves these accusations are baseless, I'll sue for defamation, wrongful suspension, everything I can think of. You're welcome to try, Vanessa said calmly. But until then, surrender your access badge and laptop to security. Chen stormed out, but not before shooting Ethan a look of pure venom. After he left, the board sat in stunned silence. If this is real, one of the older members said slowly, if Chen's been committing fraud for 18 months, the damage could be catastrophic. Which is why we need to know for certain, Vanessa said. Catherine, how fast can you get results? 3 days for preliminary findings? Full audit might take weeks. Start with preliminary. I want to know what we're dealing with. The meeting broke up. People filed out in small groups, whispering urgently. Ethan stood at the front of the room, suddenly exhausted. Vanessa approached. You know you just painted a target on your back, right? I figured. Chen has allies. If the audit finds nothing, they'll crucify you. And if it finds something, then you'll have made more enemies than friends. People who were complicit or who should have caught this and didn't. They'll resent you for exposing them. Ethan thought about that, about how telling the truth often made you unpopular, about how fighting corruption meant fighting the people who benefited from it. I'm okay with that, he said. I didn't come here to make friends. Good, because you're about to find out who your real allies are. The next 3 days were brutal. Word spread through the company about the fraud investigation, and suddenly Ethan couldn't walk down a hallway without people staring, some with respect, some with suspicion, some with outright hostility. The janitors sought him out in the basement break room, slapping him on the back and treating him like a hero for actually listening to them. The IT department sent Thomas to thank him for taking their security concerns seriously, but the executive floor was ice cold, people avoiding him like he carried a contagious disease. Ethan focused on his contract work, finishing the last reviews from his original assignment. Every document was flawless, every analysis thorough. Whatever happened with Chen, he wanted his actual job performance to be beyond reproach. On the 3rd day, Catherine Wu called an emergency board meeting. Ethan wasn't invited. He sat in his office, watching the clock, imagining what was being said in that room. His phone stayed silent. The minutes crawled past. At 4 o'clock, Vanessa appeared at his door. Her expression was unreadable. Come with me, she said. They walked to the boardroom in silence. Inside, the full board was assembled. Chen was not present. Richard looked like he'd aged 5 years. Vanessa gestured to a chair. Sit. Ethan sat. Catherine Wu stood, holding a thick report. The preliminary audit is complete. We brought in external forensic accountants to verify our findings. She paused. David Chen has been systematically embezzling funds from this company for the past 22 months. The preliminary estimate is $47 million. The number hit like a physical blow. Ethan had suspected fraud, but this was beyond anything he'd imagined. He created fake revenue streams to hide expense manipulation, Catherine continued. He'd bill the company for fake consulting services, route the payments through shell corporations he controlled, then fabricate revenue entries to balance the books. It was sophisticated and well hidden. Our regular auditors missed it entirely. How did we miss this? One board member asked, voice shaking. Because Chen was VP of Finance. He controlled what the auditors saw, and because our oversight procedures were inadequate. Catherine looked at Ethan. If Mr. Cole hadn't noticed the patterns and had the courage to report them, this could have continued indefinitely. Richard cleared his throat. I think we owe Mr. Cole an apology. Several of us questioned his qualifications and his motives. We were wrong. The words sounded like they'd been extracted with pliers, but they were words nonetheless. Thank you, Ethan said quietly. Vanessa stood. The 30-day trial period is over. Ethan, I'm offering you a permanent position as Senior Contract Analyst and Internal Fraud Investigator. Salary increase to $300,000 annually. You'll report directly to me and have authority to investigate any suspicious activity company-wide. Ethan's brain stuttered on $300,000 annually. That's generous, he managed. That's what you're worth. You just saved this company from bleeding out. I'd say you've more than proven yourself. Vanessa looked around the table. All in favor? Every hand went up, even Richard's. Welcome to Hale Industries, Ethan. Permanently. After the meeting, Ethan walked back to his office in a daze. $300,000. A permanent position. The respect of people who'd dismissed him weeks ago. He pulled out his phone and called Jamie. Dad, how'd it go? Really good, buddy. Really, really good. Did you do the scary thing right? Yeah, I think I did. I knew you would. You're the bravest person I know. Ethan's eyes burned. I'm coming to get you right now. Let's go celebrate. Can we get pizza? The fancy kind? We can get whatever you want. He picked Jamie up from Mrs. Chen's apartment, thanking her profusely for watching him. Then they went to the nice pizza place, the one with tablecloths and fresh mozzarella and prices that would have been unthinkable a month ago. Jamie ordered 3 different types of pizza, eyes wide with the freedom of not having to choose one thing and make it last. Dad, Jamie said between bites, are we rich now? The question was so innocent, so full of hope. We're comfortable, Ethan said carefully. We don't have to worry about money the same way anymore. Does that mean I can get the Lego set I wanted? The big one? Yeah, buddy, you can get the Lego set. Jamie's face split into a grin so wide it hurt to look at. This is the best day ever. After dinner, they walked home through streets that seemed less threatening, less desperate than they had a month ago. Jamie held Ethan's hand and talked about school, about his friends, about the Lego set he was going to build. Normal kid stuff. Beautiful, ordinary, normal kid stuff. At the apartment, Ethan tucked Jamie into bed and sat with him until he fell asleep. Then he stood by the window, looking out at the city, thinking about everything that had changed. A month ago, he'd been invisible. A janitor working nights, watching life happen to other people. Now he had a career, respect, financial security. But more than that, he'd learned something about being seen, about how talent existed everywhere, and people doing jobs that society deemed unimportant, about how easy it was to overlook someone because of their job title, their clothes, their circumstances. He'd been invisible because people chose not to see him, and he'd become visible by refusing to accept that invisibility. His phone buzzed, a text from Vanessa. Thank you for having the courage to do what was right even when it was terrifying. You're exactly the kind of person this company needs. Ethan texted back. Thank you for giving me the chance to prove it. 3 dots appeared then. You earned it, every bit of it. The next morning, Ethan woke early and started looking at apartments online. Places with 2 bedrooms, in safer neighborhoods, near better schools. Places where Jamie could have friends over without Ethan worrying about the environment they'd see. At breakfast, Jamie noticed him scrolling through listings. Are we moving? Maybe. Would you want to? Jamie thought about it seriously. Will Mrs. Chen still be close enough to visit? We can make sure of it. And can I bring all my stuff?
All of it. Then, yeah, I think that would be good. Jamie took a bite of cereal. As long as we're still together.
Always, buddy. That's the one thing that never changes. At work, things shifted again. The story of Chen's fraud had leaked to the press, and suddenly Hale Industries was in damage control mode. Investors were nervous. Clients were asking questions. The board was scrambling to restore confidence. But internally, something else was happening. Employees who'd been ignored started speaking up about problems they'd noticed. Inefficiencies, safety issues, concerns they'd raised before and been dismissed. They came to Ethan because he'd proven that he listened. Within 2 weeks, Ethan had uncovered 3 more significant issues. Nothing as dramatic as fraud, but problems that needed addressing. A supply chain vulnerability, a contract with terms that hadn't been honored, an HR policy that was quietly discriminating against employees with disabilities. Each time he brought something to Vanessa, she acted on it, fixed it, made changes. Slowly, the culture started to shift. People realized that speaking up didn't mean being ignored, that problems could be solved if someone was willing to listen. Ethan became a bridge between the executive floor and everyone else, between the people who made decisions and the people who lived with the consequences of those decisions. It wasn't always easy. Richard still resented him. Some executives saw him as an upstart who didn't know his place, but Vanessa had his back, and slowly, he built alliances with people who cared more about doing good work than protecting territory. 6 months after that first night in the conference room, Ethan stood in his new apartment helping Jamie unpack boxes. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a kitchen with appliances that all worked, windows that overlooked a park instead of a parking lot. Jamie was in his new room, organizing his toys and books with intense focus. The Lego set was half built on his desk, next to the spaceship model they'd finally completed. "Dad," Jamie called. "Come look." Ethan walked into the room. Jamie had arranged his books on the new shelves, color-coded and organized by size. "Looks good, buddy." "I did it like the bookshelf in your office. Is that okay?" Ethan's throat went tight. His son was mimicking his professional life, finding pride in organization and order. "It's perfect." That night, after Jamie was asleep in his own room, with his own door that closed, Ethan sat on his new couch in his new apartment and thought about the distance he'd traveled. Not just in miles or money, though both of those had changed dramatically, but in how he saw himself. In understanding that being invisible had been a choice other people made, not a truth about his worth. He thought about all the other invisible people still out there, working night shifts, raising kids alone, surviving on poverty wages while possessing skills and talents nobody bothered to recognize. He thought about the janitors who'd helped him, who'd shared information that led to catching fraud, about Thomas in IT, staying late to help colleagues with computer problems, about all the people doing essential work that got labeled low-skilled by people who couldn't survive a day doing those jobs. They deserved to be seen. They deserved opportunities. Ethan couldn't save everyone, but he could use his position to create pathways for others, to look for talent in unexpected places, to remember what it felt like to be dismissed and make sure he never did that to someone else. His phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. "Board meeting next week. We're announcing a new initiative, Employee Talent Development Program. You're running it. Interested?" Ethan smiled and typed back, "Very interested." "Good. Your job is to find the people we've been missing, the ones who are capable of more than their current positions. Make them visible." Make them visible. That was the whole point, wasn't it? Not just his own visibility, but creating visibility for everyone who'd been overlooked. "I can do that," he texted. "I know you can. That's why I'm asking." A year after walking into that conference room, Ethan stood in front of 200 employees presenting the talent development program. In the audience were janitors, security guards, administrative assistants, warehouse workers, people from every level of the company. "A year ago, I was working night shifts cleaning this building," Ethan said. "I had a college degree and professional skills, but nobody knew because nobody asked. I was invisible. Not because I lacked talent, but because people chose not to see it." He looked out at the faces watching him, seeing recognition in their eyes. This program exists because invisible doesn't mean unqualified. It means overlooked. And starting today, we're going to look. He clicked to the next slide. If you have skills you're not using, If you're capable of more than your current position, if you've been waiting for someone to notice, we're noticing now. The response was overwhelming. Within 3 months, they'd identified 47 employees with talents that weren't being utilized. A security guard with an engineering degree who started designing more efficient building systems. An administrative assistant with fluent Mandarin who moved into international relations. A warehouse worker with a gift for data analysis who revolutionized inventory management. Not everyone succeeded. Some people weren't ready for new challenges. Some preferred the stability of their current positions. And that was okay too. But the ones who did succeed changed the company from the inside out. They brought perspectives that executives had never considered. They saw problems differently because they'd lived different lives. They made Hale Industries better. Richard retired 6 months later. The official story was voluntary, but everyone knew Vanessa had made it clear his old guard approach wasn't welcome anymore. His replacement was an internal promotion, a woman who'd started in accounting and worked her way up through competence and determination rather than connections. The company culture shifted slowly, but it shifted. People started being valued for what they could do rather than where they'd started. Merit began to matter more than hierarchy. It wasn't perfect. Corporate culture never changed completely, but it got better, and better was enough. 2 years after that first night, Ethan sat in Jamie's school auditorium watching his son accept an award for academic excellence. Jamie was 9 now, healthier than he'd been in years thanks to better medication and less stress at home. He had friends, hobbies, dreams that extended beyond survival. After the ceremony, Jamie ran up with his award, grinning. "Did you see? I won." "I saw, buddy. I'm so proud of you." Mrs. Palmer says, "If I keep working hard, I could get into any college I want someday." Any college. Not just the cheap options, not just the schools within commuting distance. Any college. The possibilities were endless. "You could," Ethan agreed. "You could do anything." "I think I want to be like you," Jamie said. "Help people who need help. Make things fair." Ethan knelt down to Jamie's level. "You can be anything you want, but if you do want to help people, remember this. Everyone has value. Everyone. It doesn't matter what job they do or how much money they make or where they started. Everyone deserves to be seen." Jamie nodded seriously. "I'll remember." That night, after Jamie was asleep, Ethan stood by the window of their apartment looking out at the city. Somewhere out there were people working night shifts, struggling to make ends meet, invisible to the people around them. People with talents and dreams and potential that nobody bothered to notice. He couldn't save them all, but he'd saved himself, and in doing so, he'd learned that being seen wasn't about luck or privilege. It was about courage. The courage to step into spaces where you weren't welcome. The courage to speak up when everyone expected silence. The courage to demand recognition when the world preferred you invisible. And maybe, just maybe, in learning to see himself, he'd learned to see others. To recognize that worth wasn't defined by job titles or paychecks, or where someone appeared on an organizational chart. Worth was inherent. It existed in the janitor cleaning floors, the security guard watching monitors, the single parent working 3 jobs to keep their kid fed and housed. It existed everywhere, in everyone, waiting to be acknowledged. Ethan's phone buzzed one last time. A message from Vanessa. "Next board meeting, we're discussing company-wide pay equity. Your preliminary analysis showed gaps I can't ignore. Ready to fight another battle?" He smiled and texted back, "Always." Because that's what he'd learned in 2 years of being visible. The work never ended. There was always another battle, another person who needed advocating for, another injustice to correct. But the work was worth it. Every time someone got a chance, they'd been denied. Every time talent was recognized instead of overlooked. Every time the invisible became seen. That was worth fighting for. Ethan looked at the framed photo on his bookshelf. Him and Jamie at the park. Both of them smiling, both of them healthy and happy and secure. They'd come so far from that cramped apartment with its wobbly table and broken faucet. From the nights when Ethan wasn't sure they'd make it another month. From the invisibility that had defined his existence for 7 years. They'd survived. And then they'd thrived. Not because the world had suddenly become fair, but because Ethan had refused to accept unfairness as permanent. Because he'd taken a risk, walked through a door, spoken up when silence would have been easier. Because he'd chosen to be seen. And in being seen, he'd learned to see others, to fight for them, to create opportunities for people who'd been overlooked the same way he had been. That was the real victory, not the salary or the title or the respect from executives who'd once looked through him like glass. The real victory was understanding that everyone deserved what he'd found: a chance, recognition, the opportunity to prove their worth. Everyone deserved to be visible. And Ethan Cole, former janitor, current senior analyst, and permanent advocate for the overlooked, would spend the rest of his career making sure they got that chance, because he'd learned something in that conference room 2 years ago, something that had changed everything. Being invisible wasn't a permanent condition. It was a choice other people made, and those choices could be changed.